Yo, Atlas speaking, and welcome to part 9 of What If I Was Reborn into the Bleach universe and became the insane Vasto Lord. Let the tale begin. Chapter 264, Fabulous Tea. Even with his senses, Kazuya couldn't pinpoint the exact direction of this stalker. Ranjiku, on the other hand, was completely oblivious. This stalker was very skilled at their job. Ranjiku, let's go inside. I'll treat you to some tea. I'd have preferred some alcohol, but tea is fine. I can't be too greedy. Kazuya opened the door for her. Do you never get tired of alcohol? Booze is love. Booze is life. Ranjiku walked inside and took off her sandals. Why don't I take you out for some today? A date with my vice captain. Breaks my heart to say no to that. Ranjiku turned around and gave him a judging look. What's keeping you busy today? Training, and more training. I can't stagnate my growth because I beat some goofy-ass errand cars. Those goofy-ass errand cars nearly ended me. Ranjiku shook her head. I hope you don't reject me next time. I promise. While wearing slippers, Ranjiku took a peek down the long hallway. It's bigger than it looks from the outside. Captain Unohana gave you an expensive place. She is the best. Ranjiku glanced at his smile and realized that her captain would need more than just words to convince Kazuya into becoming his successor. At the same time, she understood the expenses were justified to gain the loyalty of a talent with his potential. It was near impossible to predict his ceiling. He might even end up joining the royal guards and directly serve the Reo. Why are all silver-haired brats geniuses? One had already become a captain, and the other was most likely to succeed her captain. She felt bittersweet about working under Kazuya in the future, as he'd always remind her of her lack of talent. 15 minutes later. Kazuya put down the tray on the low table and sat down on the floor. The living room was preoccupied by the sleeping Uruchi. As such, he had to utilize the other living room. Seriously, the house had half the rooms as his living world's mansion, which was just absurd for a house of this size. Ranjiku leaned in with closed eyes and deeply inhaled the tea's aroma. This smells heavenly. Let's see if it tastes half as good as its aroma. She picked up the teacup with both hands with more elegance and grace than Kazuya expected from her. Slowly bringing the cup to her lips, she took a small sip. Her eyes immediately lit up, and she continued sipping. With a final slurping sound to show appreciation, she put down the teacup. Ha, it was divine. The best tea of my life. How did you brew this? She only sensed his presence in the kitchen, so she knew the tea was brewed by his hands only. Oh, it's a secret. He chuckled. I'm glad you like my first brew. Observing Unohana paid off massively. With all the same ingredients present in the kitchen, he had no trouble taking guidance from the memory and recreating the same magic Unohana's tea had. First brew? Ranjiku asked with wide eyes, nearly flipping the table out of shock. You gotta be kidding me. I'm not. He shook his head, revealing a smile. Let's just say I'm very good at observing and applying the said knowledge. Captain Unohana is the one you should praise. I have tasted Captain Unohana's tea. It's good, but not as flavorful as yours. She reached forward and grabbed his collars. Can I come here every day for tea? He scratched his cheek. I get it. Can we put it behind us and talk about why you graced my home? Ranjiku went back to her seat and smiled. Can I come to see my fellow Shinigami without an ulterior motive? Yes. Ouch, that went straight through my heart. Ranjiku giggled and then suddenly put on a serious expression, the air around her shifting with her mood. I asked around for any clues about my missing Zanpakuto spirit. Can you guess what I found? More missing Zanpakuto spirits? She raised her brows in surprise. How did you know? Why, you must be the mastermind behind these incidents. Wait, is this the part where you reveal that the tea was drugged, and then I'll pass out and wake up in a dark basement? He flicked a Ryatsu bullet at her face. It's not a murder mystery. Ah, I watched a good one the other day. The Living World's theaters are amazing. Why don't we go there someday? You can help me choose some clothes and we can even dine at a restaurant there. What you're describing is a date. No, it's called hanging out with a friend. Besides, I'll cover all the expenses. You look desperate. Well, fine. I'll be your boyfriend. Ranjiku narrowed her eyes, smiling. Good. Let's talk about the Zanpakuto spirits. So who else lost their spirit? Ikaku Madarame, the vice-captain of the 11th squad. Never heard of him. She let out a soft giggle. He makes some of the funniest faces. Yesterday, when we were drinking in the town, he brought up a lack of voice from his Zanpakuto recently. Then he blamed it on Hozukimaru being upset with him for not properly utilizing its strength. Kazuya nodded as he listened to her. I heard that the guys from the 11th squad don't treat their Zanpakuto spirit with proper respect. Although he knew that Muramasa was behind Ikaku's Zanpakuto spirit's disappearance, he had to act skeptical before Ranjiku. Otherwise, she grows suspicious of him when he eventually ends Muramasa's plans. The alcoholic blonde had one of the keenest observation skills among her peers. Ranjiku nodded her head. Yeah, I'm not really certain that Madarame is suffering from the same condition as me. But it's suspicious nevertheless. I see. I'll look into your matter when I'm free from my training. Ranjiku stood up and fixed her kimono. That tea alone was worth coming here all the way. But I gotta go now or the captain will eat my ear off. See you soon. Once Ranjiku left, Kazuya stretched and returned upstairs for a quick shower. As he returned to the bedroom, he heard a scraping sound outside the window. The noise would have eluded anyone without hearing as sharp as his. He picked his Zanpakuto from the bedside and carefully approached the window. Chapter 265, Pride. Soifan clung to the wall like a spider, holding onto the roof that slanted downwards just above the window. As an assassin, she had been trained to conceal her Ryatsu and take cover in unexpected places. She never thought she'd put her skills to hide from Kazuya of all men. She had no one to blame but her own impatience. The important task of monitoring Aizen had kept her occupied. But she couldn't take it anymore today. She had to conclude her business with Yoruichi as soon as possible, or she'd lose her mind. So, after leading her underlings to monitor Aizen, she arrived at Kazuya's new home in hopes of finalizing a date for their battle. She ended up getting there before Kazuya left for his new job with the 4th squad, leading to her current predicament. Tap! 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 She heard footsteps close in the window and quickly held her breath. She may not like Kazuya very much, but she respected his strength, his only redeeming quality in her eyes. Someone of his caliber would be perceptive enough to sense the slightest of movements. He must be opening it for sunlight. Kazuya opened the window and peeked his head out, looking for something or someone. Huh? I swear I heard something. Was it my imagination? Go! Soifan yelled in her head. Leave so I can talk to Yoruichi-sama. Kazuya closed the window, letting her relax, as much as she could in her position. He is perceptive. She had never met someone who was sharp as a blade, yet dumb as a rock. Her former mistress truly found an interesting person to teach. Depending on Kazuya's next actions, she'd have to reposition. Of course, her original intention had been to hide in the courtyard and wait for her opportunity. The presence of Momo and Rukia had piqued her curiosity. But before she had the chance to get a look at the two, Ranjiku arrived to ruin her plans. Soifan had pounced on the chance to eavesdrop on them. What she learned baffled her. Swish! The window suddenly flipped open, and Kazuya leaned out again. This time he wasn't looking down, rather, he looked straight into her eyes. Long time no see, you look cute in that, berry. It was rare for Soifan to be seen outside of her Shihakusho, and a miracle to catch her in a black skin-tight sleeveless top and matching tights. A black scarf covered the lower half of her face, adding an alluring mystery to her presence. He had to admit that she looked like a competent assassin in her new clothes. Soifan stared at him, barely a hint of surprise across her face. I received a confidential mission from the Captain Commander. The tuk-tuk sound of footwear would have blown my cover. I see. How did you discover me? He pointed at his own heart. You can control your breathing, but you can't control your pounding heart. She shut her eyes and drew a long breath. Opening her eyes again, she showed her brightest smile. Huh. I got you last time, but you didn't fall for it today. You've been improving every day, it seems. Give yourself a pat on the back. Her obviously fake acting earned a blank stare from Kazuya. I'll get your Richie to do it, after you tell me why are you here. I just told you. He grabbed her ankle and yanked her off the wall, hanging her upside down. You're sneaking around my property. Speak up unless you want this matter to reach Captain Yamamoto. Hearing his blatant threat, her brow twitched in annoyance. He was the only man to threaten her openly, slap her in the face, beat her up without any consequences. Kazuya looked down at the stubborn girl who showed no signs of panic even when hung upside down. She had been in this position before. Masochist Soifan, I don't have all day. She was on a spy mission. Her target wasn't him or he'd have felt her eyes on him. Still, he had to know the identity of the person on Yamamoto's radar. For the sake of being informed about the happenings in the Soul Society. I need to get Soifan on my side. With Unohana, Shunsui, Byakuya, and possibly Aizen, he had plenty of firepower. He still fell behind Aizen in the field of information. This hot-headed lesbian was the current head of Amatsukido, the eyes and ears of the Soul Society. Assassinations, infiltration, and information gathering were some of the specialties of her department. She might be a big help in finding Muramasa and keeping those close to him safe behind his back. You're doing a convincing job to get her on our side by hanging her like a bat. She'll freak out if I start treating her normally. Nami giggled. I can imagine that happening. Why don't you just seduce her with your voice? It's not mind control. He cut off his conversation with Nami and stared at Soifan, who seemed to be ready to execute her escape plan. Chapter 266, No Escape. Meanwhile, Soifan saw Kazuya distracted and used her greatest assets, quick reflexes and exceptional core strength. Gaining momentum with a quick swing, she catapulted her upper body and reached out, grabbing the window frame. Using her newfound balance, she whipped her free leg over his head and kicked him right in the biceps. The sharp pain of her explosive heel made him wince, his grip loosening for a moment. She immediately wrestled her ankle free. Her lips curled into a victorious smirk as she let go of the window frame and let her body succumb to the gravity. She had outsmarted him and escaped his clutches. The satisfaction had her feeling like she was on cloud nine. So easy. Victory was in her grasp, until she felt something prevent her fall. Her happiness came crashing down as she registered the smirk on Kazuya's face. He had seized her wrists with speed faster than she could follow. Where do you think you're going, darling? The thought of another defeat at his hands made her blood boil. I won't let you. With a spirited roar, she kicked the window with both legs, using the momentum to propel herself. Her legs coiled around his neck, and she pulled him down with her entire weight. Let go of me. Now. Fine. He released her wrists and took hold of her butt, using it to lift her. The last time she wrapped his thighs around him, he had barely felt anything because of her loose clothes. The skin-tight suit made her muscular legs feel quite nice around his neck. Death by SNU? Soifan wriggled. I'm sorry for everything. Can you stop groping me there? Only if you promise to stay and answer my questions. I promise. She had never been in a more awkward position, so she had to relent to him. Every breath coming out of his mouth caressed her crotch, making her more conscious about the lack of panties on her lower body. Kazuya got a last squeeze of her firm ass before letting go. There you go, Soy, she cupped his face. Don't say my name. Whatever. She suddenly grabbed his hair and made him look up at her. How will I enter the room like this? Why do you want to enter my bedroom? I can't answer your questions like this. Let me come in, or meet me outside. He freed himself from the grasp of her thighs and gently shoved her. The hot-headed assassin fell down from the first floor in slow motion, her eyes wide from his betrayal. Although she was surprised, her landing was graceful and completely silent, as though she weighed less than a feather. She looked up at him with a frown. Why did you do that? Somehow, she didn't completely lose her marbles over his small prank. Perhaps the constant defeats at his hands had humbled her. He pointed at the door. Guests are only allowed through the front door. She quietly walked up to the door. It's locked. Can I break it? No! Come through the window. She clicked her tongue and leaped up. Using the window as the platform, she bounded into the room and yanked off her mask. The sight of almost naked Rukia and Momo on the bed nearly made her trip over. Kazuya placed a hand on her mouth and dragged her out of the room before she had the chance to disturb Momo and Rukia. He took her to another room and shut the door. You can speak now. She gritted her teeth, pointing a finger at him. You are the worst for sleeping with them after Yoruchi-sama favored you. She deserves better than you. Better than me? Does that person's name start with soy and end with fawn? She froze, as if struck by lightning. No. I have no romantic feelings for Yoruchi-sama. Averting your eyes from reality won't do anything. Everyone knows how much you adore Yoruchi. I do not. Soifan snapped, her figure trembling with fury. Why would I challenge her to a death match if I had feelings for her? Death match? As in a fight to the death? He had no inkling of this promised death match between Yoruchi and Soifan. But he could tell that this happened the day he found them relaxing in the hot spring. Yoruchi wants to keep me out of this. Soifan slowly nodded her head. It's a fight with some chances of death. I have to prove to Yoruchi-sama that she is nowhere as strong as she was before. And I'm strong enough for. Strong enough for? Were you trying to say something? Soifan waved her hand dismissively. Forget I said anything. She walked toward the door, reaching for the knob. Kazuya took her hand and inserted himself between her and the door. He won't let her go that easily. Soifan looked at him with a sharp glint in her eyes. Don't push my limits. You might have beaten me in a fight, however, I'm still your superior. You're preventing me from performing my duties. Knowing that fighting him would end up in her humiliation, she tried to use or rather abuse her position. Kazuya chuckled as he placed a hand on her head, ruffling her hair. You silly little thing. Do you think I know nothing about you and Yoruchi? I know the reason for this deep resentment in your heart. Soifan slapped his hand away and clenched her jaw. She began to despise Yoruchi a little for willy-nilly sharing their past with an outsider. It does not matter. I won't go back on my decision. I won't interfere with your promised deathmatch. And since it's the most important battle in your life, shouldn't we raise the stakes a little? His grin, when paired with the gleam in his eyes, gave her an ominous feeling. What stakes? But she didn't back out, for she wasn't a coward like Yoruchi. Kazuya crossed his arms. If Yoruchi loses, you'll get whatever Yoruchi promised you, plus I'll distance myself from her for 500 years. Soifan narrowed her eyes. Throwing away the relationship on a bet, you once again prove that you aren't suited for Yoruchi-sama. He only revealed a faint smile at her disappointed look. Then defeat Yoruchi and make me leave her side. If you lose, however, you'll become my information agent for the next 5 years. You won't find a better deal anywhere. Yo, partner. Don't scam the 100-year-old kid. I agree, Soifan said without taking a moment to consider. I won't lose to an out-of-shape Yoruchi-sama. Nah, I'd win and kick you out of her life. The level of confidence she exuded would have been awe-inspiring if only Kazuya hadn't already known the outcome of the match. In the main timeline, she lost to Yoruchi, who hadn't battled for 150 years. His Yoruchi had warmed up with a few battles. More importantly, she had her own inner hollow to empower her. Yoruichi would wipe the floor with Soifon any day of the week. He nodded. It's a deal. When will this match happen? We haven't decided yet. Make it tomorrow. He stepped away from the door. Yoruichi is in the living room. Inform her about the date. Be quiet about our arrangement. Soifon's sour expression vanished, replaced with gleaming joy. With his permission, she could talk to Yoruichi without any barriers. In high spirits, she left the room. Partner, what if Yoruichi threw the match? I have a few measures to guarantee her victory. If she still loses, I'll have to kill Soifon. There was no world in which he'd let a wager force him to leave Yoruichi. He liked her too much for that to happen. Partner's Yandere level is rising. It's making me hot. Father, can I slap Izanami? You'll be slapping yourself, idiot. We share the same body. I'll slap you when I recreate my body. When will you do that? I'll try it when father returns home. I don't want to alert his enemies here with my Ryatsu. Oh Lord, this girl is so considerate. I sure hope she didn't traumatize her father's best partner by imprisoning in a cage. Chapter 267, A Different Approach. Kazuya took his sweet time in the bath and even more time just looking around the kitchen. He had to prepare breakfast for 5, himself, Momo, Rukia, Yoruichi, and an unwelcome visitor. It was as good a time as any to make Soifon warm up to him. As Kazuya began chopping vegetables, a chill went down his spine, prompting him to take a quick glance over his shoulder. There, in the dark hallway, a pair of glowing blue eyes stalked him. Focusing, he made out a familiar face. Pale blonde locks fell across her face, framing her beautiful pair of blue eyes. Nami, what are you doing? The woman was none other than his Zanpakuto's spirit Izanami. Her physical form, the katana, rested in the bedroom. She had returned to her katana and then manifested physically to stalk him from the shadows. Nami emerged from her hiding spot and walked into the light. It was an experiment. I tried to step into the shoes of a stereotypical stalker Yandere. She had become too obsessed with the topic of Yandere, which may or may not be good for his future. Tsubasa's presence at least assured him about the safety of himself and those close to him. So, what did you learn from this experiment? My hunch turned out to be correct. It's boring to be here when I could just be over there and flirt with you like a normal lover, or, she said, pointing at him with a grin. Or I could stalk you from inside your head. I don't mind either, to be honest, he said with a shrug. I'm busy right now. Please don't disturb me. Nami tiptoed to his side and silently observed him, intentionally or unintentionally playing into her Yandere fantasy. You're making ramen for breakfast. Want my help? No, you're probably worse at this than me. He could rely on his dexterity and sharp memory to whip up something edible. The same couldn't be said about Nami, who hardly manifested these days. You are right, Nami said, leaning against the countertop. It's my first time seeing you in the kitchen. What got you in the mood? I can't exactly leave until Soifon does. Besides, there isn't anyone who can do this. His today's schedule only had one thing, trying not to die at Anohana's hands. He could delay his training to make sure Soifon didn't start fighting in his house. After all, she wasn't in her best mental state right now. Yoruichi's recent streak of blurting hurtful things might just trigger Soifon into whipping out her shuriken. Nami threw a glance behind her. About that. I don't think Soifon will leave anytime soon. I'm gonna throw her out after breakfast. As expected of my beloved, you love violence, she whispered, leaning closer to him. When little Tsu and I are separated, I want you to violently fuck until I pass out. He gave her a blank stare. Why stop at passing out? His zero hesitation reply made her grin, stupidly so. He shook his head and concentrated on cooking the first, best breakfast of his life. Make some for me too, beloved. Sure. My shumenpa has reached another level of mastery. You'll not be able to compete with me, Yoruchi-sama. Is that so? I'll show you tomorrow. Interrupting Soy and Yoruchi's conversation, Kazuya slid open the doorway to the living room and placed 2 bowls on the low table between them. They stopped their conversation and stared at him, as though waiting for his permission. What are you waiting for? Dig in. Yoruchi's golden eyes gleamed as she placed her paws on the table and licked the milk from her bowl. It's lukewarm. I like it. Soifan changed her staring target to the bowl. He had served her a bowl full of ramen noodles topped by boiled egg, veggies, and fragrant seasoning. Probably some of the best ramen he ever had. The statement was backed up by Nami. He gently hit the back of Soifan's head. Stop daydreaming. She shot him a piercing glare before taking up the bowl and chopsticks. She skeptically brought the noodles to her lips and slurped them down. Her eyes widened in surprise as the flavors melted in her mouth. She closed her eyes, relishing the flavor. Yoruchi gave him a side-eyed glance. You'll be in charge of breakfast from now on. She loved milk, but only in her cat form. She would need normal food to function properly in her normal form, partially for her own freedom and partially to tease him. Her life just wasn't the same without teasing someone. No, Kazuya replied without hesitation. Okay, we'll split the duty. 4 days on you. 3 days on me. No. His firm rejection left her at a loss for words. She put the bowl on the side and faced him, her golden eyes gazed at him with an earnestness one wouldn't expect from her. What ratio do you want? He raised 4 fingers, making her scowl in disgust. With a flick of her paw, she exposed her sharp claws, yet he remained steadfast in the face of her threatening gesture. He was like a boulder. Soifan slurped ramen in the background, barely paying any attention to the ongoing clash. The long clash of willpower and determination ended with Yoruchi looking away. Got it. But you better help me do the dishes or I'll poison us both. Huh? Why poison both of us? Someone has to accompany you down to hell, Yoruchi said, and her eyes gleamed with wisdom. The poisoning idea seems good to monopolize you. I'll need to consult Unohana for a poison that could affect you. Partner, stop her. She is surpassing your Yandere level. Kazuya cleared his throat. Yeah, my sweetheart. I have a better deal. We'll help each other every day. It'll be more fun that way. Yoruchi thought for a moment before nodding at his suggestion. As long as you behave and act like a good kiddo. I'll try to. No promises, though. Soifan suddenly slammed her empty bowl on the table and dashed outside the door. Yoruchi and Kazuya shared a confused glance, wondering what happened for Soifan to leave in such a hurry. Didn't even thank you for the wonderful ramen. Truly fatherless behavior. Kazuya looked at the door, sensing Soifan's Ryatsu heading rapidly in one direction. Did she dine and dash out of a friend's home? Forget about her. Look at me, Yoruchi said, getting his attention all on her. Soifan told me some things. About your battle? Yeah. She couldn't win against the final boss. He smirked. Of course. Before you ask, I forgive you for hiding it from me. I never asked for it, she said with a scowl. She said you'll observe the battle tomorrow. Yep. Someone has to make sure nobody cheats, and the battle is as fair as possible. I won't. I can't guarantee Soifan wouldn't try something despicable after I kick her face flat. She can't win. It's just not possible. Cocky. She licked the back of her paw. It's called confidence. You'll experience it when you excel in a certain skill. I'm confident in a few things, he said with a whistle. One of them is making you limp with my fingers. She unconsciously raised her paw in objection, only to put it down a second later. Turning her back against him, she began to lick the milk in her bowl. She had accepted that there was no room for a comeback. It was a losing battle, any attempt to fight back would only bring her embarrassment. Raising the white flag was the best option. Kazuya chuckled and scratched her head. Good kitty. She clicked her tongue. Go away. Alright, sheesh. No need to be so mad. Humph. Chapter 268, An Ordinary Morning. After patting Yoruichi some more, Kazuya returned to his room, where he saw Momo sitting on the bed and rubbing her eyes. Soifan's escape most likely disturbed her sleep. He couldn't say the same about Rukia, who squeezed his pillow in her arms. She would be out cold for another few hours. Kazuya-kun. She greeted him in a lethargic voice. Good morning. Wake the hell up. I got you breakfast. She looked at him in confusion until her gaze fell on the bowls in his hand. Ah. I'm sorry. What for? I'll take culinary classes, she said, pumping her fist enthusiastically. I won't let you carry this burden forever. She seemed in high spirits for the training to be his chef. Probably because it'd make him more dependent on her and get him to be more affectionate towards her. A schemer for a schemer. You two are a perfectly balanced couple. What about us? Couple stuff is temporary. Our bond is eternal, for we are soulmates tied to the same fate. Kazuya rubbed Momo's head. Just don't overdo it. I'd hate to see you get sick. I won't, Momo said, beaming a smile. Then she stroked Rukia's leg in an attempt to wake up her friend. Rukia, come on. Noodles will get soggy. Rukia pulled up the blanket and covered herself. Let me sleep. Momo's brow twitched in annoyance. You little. She yanked the blanket off of Rukia and straddled Rukia's back. Pulling Rukia's arms behind her, she locked them. Then she slowly put pressure, making Rukia's back contort unnaturally. Rukia let out a ragged whimper as though she couldn't breathe properly. My shoulders. Stop! It hurts. Stop, please. Although this bullying wasn't justified, he didn't save Rukia and remained as a bystander. He had done much worse to his friend back in his old life. Friendship was all about messing with each other. He might still be mourning you. Let's hope he gets over it and enjoys his own life. Momo maintained a steady pressure, unflinching by the painful cries of her friend. Will you get out of bed? I will. Momo released the submission hold and patted the back of Rukia's head. Hurry. Rukia turned over and sniffed. This demon isn't Momo. Kazuya, what did you do to my caring friend? Kazuya crossed his arms. She always was. You just noticed it now. It can't be. Rukia whispered with wide eyes. Momo! Were you acting until now? Momo revealed a sweet smile. A smile without a hint of emotion. Rukia, come here. I'll show you another hold. It'll bend your legs and make them touch your shoulders. Rukia shuddered from imagining herself in the pose. She immediately jumped at Kazuya and hid behind him. Kazuya, you said you would be my boyfriend. Come on, protect me from this demon. Although exaggerated, she seemed genuinely traumatized by Momo's painful submission move. Momo might have applied too much pressure. The gleam in Momo's eyes revealed her true intentions to Kazuya. She had orchestrated the whole situation as a ploy to make Rukia turn to him for protection. She willingly assumed the role of a villain to bring them closer. Kazuya waved his hand. Momo, that's enough. Yeah, no more holds. Go practice your moves on some masochist. Momo gave a close-eyed smile. Hi. Kazuya nodded and glanced back at Rukia. Aren't you a masochist? Wah. I'm not. Why don't you fight back then? Show that you're the more dominant female in this triangle. Rukia's eyes became hollow. Are you kidding me? Momo beat the crap out of a senior yesterday. I don't stand a chance against her in a street fight. Pathetic excuses. They are not. Momo giggled. Let's settle that after breakfast. After bullying Rukia for a few more minutes, Kazuya left his house. With Yoruichi around, he wasn't worried about the two. It'd be a splendid opportunity for them to get to know Yoruichi better. Not the wise, old cat they had been admiring her as, but the real confident, observant, and a tiny bit silly version of Yoruichi. A few minutes of stroll brought him to the 4th Squad's main barrack. He couldn't sense Aizen's Ryatsu nearby, but further into the residential area, she had yet to report to the squad, or she must have left for an errand. Judging from her stale Ryatsu, he leaned toward the possibility of her sleeping. Honestly, he was tempted to show up unexpectedly at her doorstep. Let's save it for after training. He walked into the open area, where tons of nurses stopped to look at him. People wouldn't stop whispering things behind his back, questioning each other about the nature of his relationship with their captain. The last time they saw him was hitching a ride on Minazuki with Unohana. Feeling amused by the development, he took the stairs to Unohana's office. He found her lady kneeling in seiza position, her eyes shut tight. She seemed to be meditating or communicating with her zanpakuto that lay unsheathed on her lap. He made an effort to be as quiet as possible as he approached her and then took a seat in front of her. Within moments, he was captivated by her. Her elegance was simply unrivaled when she wasn't speaking or actively trying to murder him. And despite her age surpassing 2,000 years, she possessed the looks of a woman in her mid-30s, which, in his humble opinion, represented the height of a woman's attractiveness. Content creators from your previous life want you to reconsider that thought. Fuck them. Unohana opened her eyes. For a few moments, they just gazed at each other, one confused and the other calm. Morning. A troubled expression crossed Unohana's face. Kazuya, I can't talk to it. Minazuki isn't responding to me. Chapter 269, Summon. Muramasa got Minazuki. Boy, it'll be a pain for you to deal with him. The rapid progress of Muramasa's plan gave Kazuya a strong hunch that the rebellion drew closer. A rebellion that was in name only, the true goal of which was to weaken Yamamoto by taking away his ability to use his zanpakuto. Aizen isn't messing around now. Brother Sōsuke took a long rest and went back to scheming. Unohana suddenly placed her sword against his neck. You don't look the least bit surprised. He casually pushed back her blade, showing a solemn expression. I talked to Ranjaku today. Ikaku Madarame of the 11th Squad might be dealing with the same issue. Madarame too? Who could be behind this? No matter how hard Unohana thought, she couldn't pinpoint anyone with the ability to take someone's zanpakuto spirit away. The ability went against the very fundamentals of the Soul Society. Kazuya would be her first suspect if she wasn't familiar with him. After all, his mere existence defied every established notion about Shinigami and Hollow. Her close second suspect would be Aizen, someone she knew next to nothing about. It might be Aizen's trump card. His answer made her frown, as she imagined the fate of the Soul Society with everyone being unable to use their zanpakuto. Most captains wouldn't be able to fight at their designated rank without their shurikai or bankai. Only abnormalities like Kenpachi and Yoruichi could fight at their best, as their fighting style never relied on their zanpakuto. If your doubts aren't misplaced, this will be catastrophic for the Soul Society, she whispered, looking mighty serious. Will the ability work on you? Your zanpakuto is principally different from a normal Shinigami. She had no knowledge of his zanpakuto, but she knew he wielded two fundamentally different types of zanpakuto, a support type and a complete offensive type in his hollow form. She hadn't seen his hollow form in action, but she had heard of it from Aizen himself. And from those words, she had felt nothing but curiosity about the full potential of his zanpakuto. Kazuya shook his head. Probably not. My zanpakuto is. Nami, come out. As he knocked on his katana's guard, wisps of flames emerged from its sheath, and from them emerged Nami. Unohana was somewhat surprised to see his zanpakuto spirit dressed in overtly regal clothing that starkly contrasted with the traditional Japanese aesthetics embraced by the Soul Society. Nami smiled, raising the edge of her dress and giving a curtsy bow. It's an honor to make your acquaintance, Unohana-sama. I'm Izanami no Makoto. Nami for short. Nami's formal etiquette surprised Unohana as she expected his Zanpakuto spirit to be a reflection of him. There wasn't a speck of rudeness or playfulness to be gleaned from Nami's behavior. Smiling, Unohana waved her hand. No need to be formal, Izanami-san. It's not a matter of needs, but a matter of want. Nami sat down on the floor, mirroring Unohana's overly formal Saiza style. Feeling Kazuya's intent gaze, she cleared her throat loudly. Partner, it's not nice to make people uncomfortable with your stare. Uncomfortable my ass, he muttered under his breath. Why are you role-playing Soifon when she is around Yoruchi? Don't tell me you have a crush on Retsu. It's not like that. Unohana-sama is my idol. Nami chuckled. Truth be told, I have always admired her. Idol? Unohana asked, confused. What have I done to earn your adoration? Ever since she hung up her boots, sword, she had done nothing but heal her people and even enemies she had encountered along the way. She never thought her work could get not one but two women's admiration, with Aizen being the first. Nami revealed a cheeky grin. Unohana-sama is everything I want to be, a perfect blend of gentleness and insanity. And she brings it all together with a sense of impeccable grace. How can I not admire her? Unohana took back her previous words. Nami was just as, if not more, eccentric than Kazuya. What are you teaching your Zanpakuto spirit? He shrugged. She has been infected from the start. Indeed, my desires are partner's fault, Nami said. He likes crazy, and I want to be the craziest bitch out there. It's as simple as that. Unohana couldn't help but smile. Even your Zanpakuto spirit is obsessed with you. I'd be more careful if I were in your shoes. Obsession, when extreme, can lead to extremely dangerous situations for the victim. One of these days, you may wake up with a knife in your chest. She had heard too many stories, tragedies, that ended poorly for both parties. After all, even the strongest person was vulnerable in their sleep. Walking up to him and stabbing him over and over would be a delightful feeling. She slapped her cheeks, snapping herself out of the vivid, bloody vision. I wouldn't mind being stabbed by Retsu's sword. Unohana looked at him with a blank gaze, wondering what she had done to get him to act this way toward her. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Nothing was her fault. He had an abnormal personality to begin with. Nami burst into laughter. Partner, how could you say that with a straight face? Say it with a tiny smile to come off as even crazier. Nah. I'm not crazy. Are you sure? Yes. Liking crazies doesn't qualify me as one. I think? Kind of true. Nami nodded slowly as though coming to an enlightenment. Partner is wise beyond his years. Unohana rubbed her forehead, suddenly looking concerned about resting the Soul Society's future in his hands. This discussion will lead nowhere. He reached out and took her hand. Let's leave whatever this is and go to my place. She swatted his hand away. We still have your training. Come, let's finish it quickly so I can discuss this Zanpakuto spirit vanishing phenomenon with Captain Yamamoto. She had to discuss this matter with Yamamoto and find the culprit behind it, or else the whole Soul Society might lose their Zanpakuto spirits. He let out a sigh. We'll have to use Shuimpa today. It'll be a good warm-up for... She suddenly looked to her right, sharp eyes seemingly gazing beyond the wall. Captain Soifon. She turned to him with an inquisitive look. Have you done something to her? He looked like he wanted to curse out loud. Nothing, well, aside from beating her a couple of times in the past. Doesn't feel like she is here for that. Nami glanced between the two of them before disappearing back into the katana with a goodbye. She wanted no part of the drama that would soon occur due to Soifon. Sliding through the door in a hurry, Soifon showed, her forehead covered in sweat. Kazuya, get up now. Captain Commander has summoned you. Chapter 270, Summon, 2. As Kazuya made his way to the first squad's barracks, he couldn't shake off the feeling that something was wrong. Yamamoto had several reasons to summon him, but none were in his favor. Is he finally onto you? I don't think so. In the event that Yamamoto discovered Kazuya's hollow side, Yamamoto wouldn't send Soifan alone, he would come here on his own. What if he did this to lower your guard? Old man isn't a pussy. As far as he knew, Yamamoto wasn't the type to play mind games or scheme. The old man settled his matters with Lawless. When the lawful approach failed, Yamamoto fell back to the old-fashioned method of brawling it out with bare fists. Maybe he wants to know more about Arrancars from me. He had yet to answer any question regarding the Arrancar invasion in Karakura town. Quite surprising, since he had been at the forefront of the incident. Could be that too. Let's stay cautious, yeah? Those words don't suit someone trying to be crazy. Nami laughed. How about don't back down if Yamamoto wants a fight? You'll smoke his ass and burn down the Soul Society. Is that crazy enough for you? I'm in love. Retreating from the odd conversation, he took a glance to his left. Soifan dashed from roof to roof with him. They were nowhere close to their peak Shuinpa speed. Still, she was barely breaking a sweat from exertion. She is a cardio monster. Imagine someone with her endurance riding you. She'll last hours. Yoruichi won't fall behind her. True. Both have excellent endurance. Kazuya flicked a Ryatsu bullet at Soifan's face, which she dodged with a slight tilt of her head. Any idea what Captain Commander wants from me? You'll know when we get there. Come on. You're making me nervous. As if I'll believe that crap, Soifan said with a snort. People like you exist to make others nervous and miserable. Aw. You're being so nice today. Unohana watched the two with a calm gaze. Kazuya, it's probably for something important. Although she couldn't see a hint of worry on his face, she knew that being called out of nowhere by Yamamoto made him anxious, rightfully so. The rare vulnerability in his otherwise persistent calmness invoked a strange emotion in her chest. She felt a strong urge to reassure him about his safety, that everything would turn out fine as long as she was there. Soifan's presence changed Unohana's mind from acting sporadically on her emotions. After a couple of minutes, Kazuya could sense Yamamoto's vigorous Ryatsu. Yamamoto wasn't alone, as he could feel Jinrai's Ryatsu in the same location. The lack of captain-level forces gave him some assurance that he wasn't walking into a trap. Soifan led him into the assembly hall, where two elderly but very healthy men were engaged in a serious conversation. They paused in surprise when they saw him, clearly not expecting him to show up with Soifan. Their reaction was a little out of place as, according to Soifan, Yamamoto had summoned him. This, at least, provided him with the assurance that his hollow identity remained safe. Soifan, you're such a liar. She flinched momentarily. Regaining her composure, she assumed an aloof expression. Be a little patient. We'll address your confusion in a minute. All right. Kazuya raised his hand with a smile. How are you doing, Jinrai Aji-san? In reply to his greeting, the old man nodded back, maintaining his typical stoic demeanor. Byakuya's grandfather was the type to choose death over acting unbecoming of an aristocrat. Yamamoto, on the other hand, gazed at Soifan with cold, emotionless eyes. Is he the best candidate? He is the best support we'll need for this particular expedition. He can cover the healing needs, and he won't slow me down like the rest. With him, I won't have to be too cautious when scouting and gathering information. With a serious expression, Soifan threw compliment after compliment, praising his abilities to the high heaven. She picked words that would stroke one's ego in perfection. Kazuya realized her goal. She wanted to prove it to Yamamoto and Jinrai that she trusted and respected him, and she wanted to do the bare minimum to make him feel like she couldn't do it without him. Jinrai revealed a look of understanding. I can vouch for Kazuya-kun's Shuinpa. He is the very best this new generation has to offer. I can vouch for his healing capabilities, Unohana said, stepping forward and eyeing Soifan with an unblinking gaze. He is the best my division has to offer at the moment. Regarding the assignment, can I know the specifics and where it would take place? Kazuya rubbed the back of his head, feigning a look of embarrassment. Yeah, let's talk about that. Soifan has given me no information whatsoever. It'll be bad if I mess up cause I was thrown into a mission outside of my comfort zone. He couldn't leave the Soul Society for too long or else Aizen might take over with Muramace's ability. He had to pick his path carefully and avoid involving himself with long-term missions. Soifan gave him a skeptical look. You can adapt to any situation. Like you adjusted to the high-level battle in Karakura town. This assignment will be nothing for you. Okay, I was lying to weasel my way out. I don't want to leave my girlfriend alone for too long. Girlfriends, Soifan retorted. The operation shouldn't last longer than a week. It's not that big of a deal. 2 days. I can't spare more than that. Soifan's eyes widened at his confidence. It's not impossible to finish it within 2 days, but you'll have to forego rest. I'm fine with that. So, what is the goal? Invading Hueco Mundo, Yamamoto spoke in a solemn tone. The last invasion had a drastic effect on the Soul Society. I fear the Hollows have united a leader and are planning a major attack. We need someone to get in, gather information about their plans, and safely bring the information back to us. The Captain Commander had become a bit restless from the silence shown by Arankars. The strength Arankars showed could pose a threat to the Soul Society's stability. They had to take proper measures to make sure they weren't caught off guard at a vulnerable moment. Kazuya laughed as he slapped Soifan's back. All right, I'm ready. Soifan looked at him like he had lost his mind. We're going into enemy territory. Where is all that fearlessness coming from? Considering your mediocre stealth skills, you'll surely be discovered by Arankars. I need to be there to save your sorry life. And I'm fairly confident in my ability to slaughter Arankars. The majestic king of Hollow will slay his people. Why you dash? Soifan nearly cursed him for his insolence. Not everyone is stupidly perceptive like you. I'll be fine with my skills. He gently rubbed her head. Silly girl, we're dealing with Hollow souls who have animalistic traits. It'll be hard to fool them. This time, Soifan didn't argue with him. She had tested and perfected her stealth against Shinigami. But she had never put her skills to test against an Arankar. Unohana placed a hand on his shoulder while looking at Yamamoto. When will they depart? Tomorrow, Yamamoto answered. At dawn. Understood. Yamamoto turned his attention to Kazuya. I'll need you to answer some questions. Sure. Chapter 271, Encounter. Yamamoto's inquiry began with seemingly straightforward questions that anybody who fought Arankars could have answered, such as the strength of an individual Arankar, their motive, and their tendency to harm Shinigami. But the questions quickly became complex with who among them was the strongest and why did he think this one in particular was the strongest, and how many Arankars escaped with their lives. Fortunately for Kazuya, he had long prepared answers for each one of these questions. Yamamoto had given him too much time to come up with facts weaved with lies. Don't know his name, but I fought him first in the town. He was the toughest opponent by a mile. I couldn't have defeated him on my own without losing an arm or two. He deliberately downplayed Ulquiorra's abilities to save himself from becoming the second too powerful for a rookie target, the first being Kenpachi Zaraki. Soifan's expression darkened as a realization dawned on her. Given that Kazuya had defeated her fairly effortlessly, she might not stand the slightest chance of victory against this Arankar. Noticing her reaction, Kazuya turned to Soifan, a faint smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. Your line of thought is correct. He would utterly demolish you. You might be fast, but you have no chance of landing 2 hits with your Shuriken on him. He never let go of an opportunity to belittle Soifan as seeing her angry and frustrated yet powerless to do anything pleased him. He wasn't a complete sadist, but for some reason derived a little too much pleasure from Soifan's suffering. Maybe it had something to do with their first meeting, where she had tried to humiliate him in front of hundreds. Soifan clicked her tongue, visibly irritated by his blunt assessment. I didn't become a captain from doing paperwork. I have ingrained Hakuya techniques in every fiber of my muscle. Even if I go up against someone stronger than me, I'll be able to adapt on the fly. Her confidence came from over a century of honing her combat skills on her own. This type of confidence wouldn't break, of course, unless someone truly showed her the depths of despair. He reached out and patted her shoulder. I have no doubt about your skills, but trust me, you won't last a minute against that freak. The sympathetic look he gave her was a salt on her wounds. She gritted her teeth, yet she could do nothing in Yamamoto's presence. She silently swore to have her payback tomorrow, when she would be alone with him in Hueco Mundo. Kazuya chuckled softly before turning to Yamamoto. Any other questions for me? Nothing. I'll hear from you after you return. Yamamoto shifted his gaze to Unohana, his wrinkled face carrying no emotion. Captain Sōsuke will be here any moment. I want everyone to leave. Even you, Jinrei-san. Ah, Unohana murmured as a look of understanding crossed her serene features. Be mindful of Captain Sōsuke's behavior. He has been acting rather strangely ever since the incident. Rather than outright voicing her suspicions, she sowed seeds of doubts. I will be. Kazuya couldn't help but frown. Although Yamamoto's strength surpassed Aizen, the idea of them meeting without any supervision bothered him. Yamamoto kept Aizen in check just by existing. The whole status quo would shift if Aizen used some underhanded tactic to injure, or worse, kill Yamamoto. Ah, you're so jealous. Nami. 'Twas a joke, partner. Anyways. You're overestimating Aizen. Being cautious is good, but being overly cautious is not healthy for you. Of all people, he wasn't expecting Nami to be mindful of his mental health. Yeah, I gotta trust the old man. He won't fold over without a crazy fight. Pushing his concerns to the back of his mind, he prepared his heart for the training to come. Unohana wouldn't go easy on him just because she couldn't sense her Zanpakuto spirit. And honestly, he wouldn't have it any other way. While not a battle-hungry maniac, he enjoyed clashing swords with her. She showed him all the holes in his skills, giving him a perfect stage to evolve his skills. Right now, he considered growing strong one of the best feelings in the world. Gently pulling at Unohana's hand, he said, Captain, let's leave. Unohana nodded, offering a polite bow to Yamamoto and Jinrei. I'll take my leave now. Soifan pointed at Kazuya's face. Be prepared for tomorrow. Stop acting like you owe me something. I'll show up if I feel like it. Why are you treating it like it's not important business? The mission is important, but you aren't. I can accomplish this mission on my own. His calm and collected answer only poured more fuel on her fire. Knowing Soifan's temper, he left before she could explode on him. As though preordained by fate itself, Kazuya came face to face with Aizen the moment he walked out of the assembly hall. Unlike the last time, he had zero sense of anxiety. Why, if it isn't Captain Unohana, Aizen greeted with his perfect good guy smile that had kept him away from any suspicions until now. I didn't get the chance to express my gratitude last time. Thank you for your assistance with my injuries. Unohana accepted his gratitude with a gentle smile. It's my duty to heal the wounded. As humble as ever, Aizen said with a wry smile before looking at Kazuya. A rather unexpected surprise to see you accompanying Captain Unohana in Vice Captain Kotetsu's place. She is out on an errand, Kazuya lied with an honest smile. Captain Commander needed some answers regarding errand cars, so I got summoned here. I see. Well, consider this an opportunity to get to know other captains better. You'll be working with them as a captain in no time. No way. Captains have so many responsibilities. I want to enjoy my life for a few hundred years first, if you know what I mean, Kazuya replied with a laugh. By the way, thanks for handling that final boss errand car in Karakura town. Her Ryatsu was making me shiver on the other end of the town. I'm glad I didn't have to fight her. Aizen maintained his pleasant demeanor, but Kazuya caught the brief flash in his eyes. Aizen hadn't expected Kazuya, the most ambitionless man in Aizen's plan to become the biggest hurdle to his Karakura town's plans. The academy is the future of the Soul Society. Aizen responded to his gratitude with a modest chuckle. I only did what any other Shinigami would do. Captain Sōsuke, you might be the most reliable captain. Unohana's fingers found Kazuya's arm, delivering a subtle but firm pinch. Are you saying I'm not reliable? It's a different type of reliability. Like you'll heal all my wounds and support me, but Captain Sōsuke, he'd protect me from receiving those injuries in the first place. Oi, stop fanboying over Aizen. This acting is going too far. Aizen revealed a warm smile. You're a little mistaken about Captain Unohana. She is, well, forget I said anything. The shrewd captain stopped short of revealing Unohana's secret and bade his farewells to the two before walking into the assembly hall. Even though he revealed nothing concrete, his words were clearly designed to plant a seed of doubt about Unohana in Kazuya's mind. It would have been a clever move to drive a rift between Kazuya and Unohana if they weren't so familiar with each other. As soon as the door shut behind them, Unohana firmly gripped his hand and led him away. Chapter 272, Promise. Once she was back to the familiar grounds of the 4th Squad, Unohana placed a hand on her chest and let out a sigh of relief. I know Sōsuke was putting on an act, yet his smiles, his compliments, his expressions looked so genuine. I almost let my killing intent slip. It was evident that she hadn't been fully prepared for this encounter with Aizen. And it had led her to almost making a massive blunder. Kazuya patted her shoulder. You were in complete control back there. I forgot that Aizen was a bad guy. That's how good you were at acting. After a bout with Aizen, he had learned to read Aizen's subtle expressions. And he had seen no noticeable signs of doubt on Aizen's face regarding Unohana. His consideration earned him a small, grateful smile from Unohana. Still, if Aizen becomes suspicious of you, the blame is mine. He'll never go after you as long as you're Retsu Unohana. Yachiru Unohana is a different matter though. He'll try to get rid of you if you ever pick up that sword for the Soul Society again. Even under the influence of Aizen Shirkai, Unohana posed a significant threat. When thrust into a precarious situation, a natural-born killer like her could adapt to the sense-warping powers of Kyokusuijetsu. Aizen would never underestimate her or Yamamoto. Closing her eyes, Unohana put a hand on the hilt of her Zanpakuto. I can't do that. I made a promise. Even if Aizen goes after Aizen? Curiosity got the better of him, and he couldn't resist asking this question. Will she break her promise for Aizen, whom she treated like her daughter more than her vice-captain? Unohana's eyes snapped open, taking on murderous look. An overwhelming bloodlust emanated from her. I'll put him under Minazuki and kill him. Over, and over, until his mind fades into nothingness. I won't let anyone lay a hand on Aizen. As expected, she showed willingness to throw away her promise for Aizen. Greater good of the Soul Society mattered less than her own vice-captain. He revealed a faint smile. That's probably the reason I like you. Without mincing his words, he revealed his true feelings. His straightforwardness caught her off guard. This isn't the time for your tomfoolery. I'm not though. Besides, you won't ever have to break your promise. If anyone tries to harm Aizen or anyone else close to me, I'll give up on being an upstanding Shinigami and kill them. Even Aizen. Despite his nonchalance, Unohana knew that he wasn't lying. Not one bit. She was once again reminded of why she had entrusted everything to this young man. His determination to see through had earned her respect. Kazuya, she whispered. Are you hiding your true abilities even now? Her question received a quiet nod from him. She studied his face intently. Unbelievable, you still have a trump card, an ability that can kill Aizen before he can get support from any captain. Could it be your Bankai? Nope. It's something else. Though I prefer not to use it with my current capabilities, or I might end up becoming an abnormality. Unohana smiled. What are you talking about? You already are an abnormality by every metric used in the Soul Society. He took a dramatic step back, placing a hand on his chest. That one hurt. She shook her head at his melodramatic behavior. I have one more question for you. Why did you agree to go with Soifan? You made no attempts to refuse her. Does our training matter to you at all? The assembly hall didn't allow her the opportunity to probe his true motive behind helping Soifan. Do you know what would happen if I didn't agree to go? Anohana's gaze drifted towards the distant gate. Another healer would have to accompany Soifan. The default option for high-profile assignments is Aizen. Yeah, exactly. Either Aizen had to leave, or Soifan had to go on her own, he said with a frown. I'm not doubting Aizen's ability, but Hueco Mundo is far more dangerous than a captain and vice-captain can handle. It's Espada's base. Taking unnecessary risks simply isn't my approach. She slowly nodded her head, looking satisfied with his explanation. You can leave with a clear conscience. I'll look after your little girlfriends. You better keep them safe. Unohana bared a vicious smile, one that looked far from her typical saintly demeanor. Anyone who tries to touch them will have their innards gutted by Minazuki. Wow, Retsu is finally showing her true colors. She let out a disappointed grunt. There's no need for pretense. You knew the real me from the beginning. How madly I lust for blood and battle. He reached out and patted her head. Well, it's a good thing your future husband is an immortal being, isn't it? All traces of viciousness vanished from her face, replaced by a look of mild annoyance. It's unfortunate I stopped being a criminal. Or else I'd have put your claims to the test with my blade. Feel free to try me anytime. I'll do it later. She grabbed his collar with a grin. When we train. Kazuya gulped. Okay, ma'am. Meanwhile, the living world. Apache opened the door to a green-haired woman in a denim jacket and tight pants. The visitor appeared ordinary, only a lot more beautiful than the people in the town. Hey! Hey! How are you doing? Apache's awkward greeting was met with an enthusiastic greeting like no other. The reason for Apache feeling so awkward had to do with her past visit to Hueco Mundo. She grappled with how to face the hollow she had tried to kill. Was she meant to smile warmly and pretend it never happened, or act all grumpy because the hollow defeated her? Neliel cocked her head slightly, puzzled by Apache's lack of energy. Are you the same person who tried to devour me? Did putting on the maid dress change you? Still the same old Apache who got her teeth kicked in by you. Don't be bitter about it. There will always be people beyond our current reach, she whispered with a distant look, her lips curving into a nostalgic smile. This is what fills life with a sense of purpose, you know. I'll keep bashing my head against the wall until I reach their level or surpass them. Fat chance of that happening. Apache knew the man Neliel wanted to surpass, and she could never imagine any hollow ever coming close to his strength. Neliel accepted Apache's discouraging words with a calm face. People can cling to unachievable goals. My goal is becoming unachievable too. Apache whispered, lamenting her inability to become a Vasto Lord. She did her best every day, training with Lisa and the other Vizard, consuming the rogue hollows around the town, and even trying out the weird meditation techniques shown on the television. Nothing could nudge her toward the final boundary. What was she meant to do to become a Vasto Lord? Shaking off her melancholy, Apache pinned Neliel with a sharp gaze. Why exactly are you here? Neliel took off her heat, which had been covering the remnants of her hollow mask. Is he home? No. Apache crushed Neliel's hopes with a curt response. Don't ask me where he is. He doesn't want anyone to disturb him. Neliel's shoulders sagged visibly as a dispirited sigh left her lips. She had hoped Kazuya was concealing his Ryatsu as usual, and she would be able to meet him. Apache, can you tell him Neliel returned to Hueco Mundo? I'll be at my usual spot if he requires anything from me. Neliel put on her hat and tucked her hands in her pocket before walking away. Wait, what about those annoying little critters? For Neliel to leave the living world would mean abandoning her people. Apache never took Neliel for someone who abandoned her people. Neliel revealed a bittersweet smile. Her entire demeanor shifted at the mere mention of her little companions. I'll talk about it some other day. With a vague answer, Neliel adjusted her hat once more and tucked her hands in her pockets before walking away, leaving a perplexed Apache behind. What the hell happened to her? Chapter 273 through 274, Restrained Jealousy. With Momo and Rukia staying at home, Yoruichi found herself pleasantly occupied rather than bored as she would have been alone. Calm, confident, and with centuries of experience, she could guide the conversation in any direction and come up with light-hearted subjects to tease the young women. Witnessing their initial blushing brought her joy, but eventually, it grew boring. Rukia wasn't as open to teasing as Momo. What's more, there was little amusement to be found without a challenge. The challenge was one of the reasons she took pleasure in teasing Kazuya. And after all this time, she had only succeeded one time, the time she chose to pleasure his penis with her mouth. A priceless memory for sure. Although embarrassing, she wouldn't trade the moment for anything in the world. The reminder of him stirred her to check on his Ryatsu. Her senses registered his Ryatsu in an instant, despite the distance between them. His aura was intense and erratic, he was engaged in a battle. She also felt Unohana's Ryatsu, which was no less wilder than him. They are finally going at it. Their Ryatsu had been stuck at some place for a while, but now she could rest assured that his training had commenced. Honestly, she would have done the honor of training him on her own. Alas, her true talent lay in unarmed combat, while Unohana excelled at wielding a blade. Training with Unohana would benefit him more at this stage. I'm not jealous of Unohana, am I? Her brows furrowed in contemplation. Whatever. I can still help him refine his movement and unarmed skills. As she had no pressing matters to attend to, she racked her brain for a way to make Kazuya blush without resorting to sexual means. Her cat-like ears twitched as she plotted, taking inspiration from a certain someone, and before she knew it, a mischievous grin had spread across her face. His Anane-san. Rukia paused and pointed at Yoruichi's face, a perplexed frown on her face. I'm talking about my sister's sickness, but she is grinning. What an awful woman. A tinge of disappointment colored Rukia's gaze, as if she had expected more from someone who claimed to be Kazuya's mentor. Momo pursed her lips. She could see Rukia using the opportunity to target Yoruichi. Still, she stayed silent, assuming a neutral position as she didn't want to favor one over another. Yoruichi rubbed the back of her head. You've got it all wrong, kiddo. I wasn't paying attention. Me grinning has nothing to do with your sister. Don't bother. I know you're one of those freaks who take pleasure in someone else's suffering. Instead of accepting Yoruichi's half-hearted apology, Rukia voiced the thought that had been weighing on her mind. All the teasing from Yoruichi had led her to believe that Yoruichi was a sadist. And her cat features only solidified Rukia's suspicions, as cats were known to play with their prey before killing them. A natural sadist. Yoruichi simply shrugged her shoulders at the accusations. While she did take pleasure in teasing others, she didn't quite fit the definition of a sadist. She wasn't that far gone. Rukia turned her gaze, whispering, Yoruichi-san isn't the right person for him. Yoruichi finally realized Rukia's problem with her. Byakuya's sister-in-law was just looking out for Kazuya by singling out unworthy women around him. From an outsider's perspective, Yoruichi hadn't done anything notable. Rather, she sat around while Kazuya prepared breakfast. Afterwards, she lazed around the bedroom while teasing them, coming off as a sadist. Of course, Rukia would take issue with Yoruichi now that she was officially Kazuya's girlfriend. The cat lady reached out and pinched Rukia's nose. You silly lass. I'm not a sadist. What's more, Byakuya and I are old buddies. I'll never wish for his or his Anna's misfortune. She had trained with Byakuya since before Rukia was even a toddler. Everyone in the Shihoin and Kachiki clans at the time knew about their unruly tag games and chases that spanned the entire Seriidii. Her bond with Byakuya was second only to her bond with Kasuke. As she thought back on these memories, a slight frown creased her forehead. Where does that put Kazuya? First? Yes. Pet best. Bring pet. The spirited voice in her mind belonged to the childlike being residing in her inner world. Yoruichi had assumed her hollow was gone since she hadn't heard from it in a while. It was just her wishful thinking. Pet. Go back to sleep. Pet. 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 Yoruichi covered her ears, even though the voice was coming from within her own head. This put an end to the hollow's demands, at least for the time being. Phew, she went back to sleep. She opened her eyes and saw a look of worry on Rukia and Momo's faces. Rukia's concern quickly disappeared, and she made what Yoruichi thought was an exaggerated sound of dissatisfaction. Byakuya-ni-san would never be friends with someone like you. It hadn't been half a year since Rukia had reconnected with her older sister, but it was enough time for her to develop immense admiration for her brother-in-law. She could never imagine a dignified man like him associating himself with a lazy bum like Yoruichi, much less being buddies. Someone like me? Yoruichi smirked. Yeah, I'm just a slut mooching off of Kazuya. Isn't that right? Rukia blinked, surprised that Yoruichi had voiced her exact thoughts. Yeah. As Kazuya's girlfriend, I think I have a right to protect him from bad company. I'm not just bad company, kiddo. I'm the baddest of them all. I'm the ultimate baddie of the Soul Society. It's enough, Momo spoke in a firm yet gentle voice. Rukia, let's end it here. Your judgment won't sway Kazuya-kun. She has earned her place in Kazuya-kun's heart, and mine as well. Dare I say, her place is more solid than ours. She could no longer stay neutral. More importantly, she couldn't let Rukia continue to look down on Yoruichi and see her as an unworthy lover for Kazuya. Rukia's eyes widened in disbelief. What? You're saying he likes this catgirl more than us? Momo matched Yoruichi's gaze and nodded earnestly. He does. There is a reason behind his affections, I'm sure of it. I'll wait until Kazuya-kun tells me everything on his own. Yoruichi revealed a smug grin. Lil Rukia, Momo is right. The man you love has secrets. More secrets than you both can imagine. Everyone does. Rukia raised an eyebrow, black strands of hair outlining her face. She watched Yoruichi for a while before shrugging her shoulders. Momo, I'm hungry. Bring me something. Momo rolled her eyes, but paused as she remembered the delicious ramen prepared by Kazuya. Yoruichi-san, did Kazuya-kun make extras for breakfast? Rukia scowled. You want to eat soggy noodles? It's made by Kazuya-kun. I'll eat it. Momo turned her hopeful gaze to Yoruichi. Should I check it myself? Yoruichi extinguished Momo's hopes with a shake of her head. I don't think so. Momo fell back on the bed and clutched the blanket close to her face, which had his scent all over it. I'm going to sleep, wake me up when Kazuya-kun is back. She would pay any price to time travel into the future to skip any extra moment and only experience moments with Kazuya, or to return to the past and relive her precious memories with him. Rukia grabbed Momo's legs and yanked her off the bed. She crossed her arms, looking down at Momo with a look of disapproval. No, you are not. You're coming with me to the dorm. We'll get something to eat there. As students, they had pretty much no money to spend. It was quite fortunate that the academy's free meals were both delicious and nutritious. Momo dragged the blanket and wrapped herself in it. No, let me soak in Kazuya-kun's scent. Arg, you weirdo. You had him all night yesterday. How are you missing him already? Momo lowered the blanket, peeking innocently. I just love him too much, okay? What you show isn't love, idiot. It's obsession. Rukia gazed at her friend for a moment before sighing. Yoruichi-san, I'll make something myself. Yoruichi whipped her head around and lazily waved her hand. Don't ask for my permission. This house belongs to your boyfriend. I'm just a freeloader. An intense blush spread across Rukia's face. Why yeah, you're right. It's my house too. She darted out of the room, and a calm silence fell in the room. Momo fidgeted with the blanket and stood up, pinning the chocolate-skinned girl with a sharp gaze. The type of gaze her younger brother showed when he had caught her scribbling on an unconscious clan elder's face. Yoruchi-san, when you were distracted earlier, were you thinking about Kazuya-kun? Momo spoke slowly and assuredly, oozing confidence that Yoruchi had never felt from Momo. What's more, the black eyes contained no innocence that Yoruchi had seen in her and Shiro in their first meeting. She felt like the person standing in front of her wasn't Momo, but someone else entirely. Still, she wouldn't be the Flash Goddess if she let something as meager as this startle her. I was monitoring his Ryatsu, which makes you right in a sense. Momo smiled knowingly, her gaze seeming to penetrate into Yoruchi's soul. Have you officially started a relationship with him? There is nothing between us. Yoruchi hesitated in revealing her arrangement with Kazuya until she sorted out her feelings and decided her future. Momo plopped down beside Yoruchi and swung her legs cheerfully. I love Kazuya-kun. I love him so much. I think I love him more than myself. Everyone knows that, but has anyone told you how this love has changed you? You used to be a sweet, innocent kid, now you're a clingy, desperate woman. It had also changed Yoruchi, substantially. But pointing out changes in Momo was much easier than realizing her own changes. Momo turned to her with a sweet smile. I don't care. Figured as much. Yoruchi chuckled. Why are you telling me about your love, though? Momo rested her head on Yoruchi's lap and took her hand, placing it on her head and guiding it to stroke her hair. The gesture was more than enough for the chocolate-skinned woman to understand her intentions. So, she began stroking Momo's hair. Momo smiled. I don't want Kazuya-kun to ever stop loving me. Yoruchi gently pressed her hand against Momo's face. He won't. He isn't that kind of man. I know, Momo whispered. Still, if there comes a day Kazuya-kun loses his love for me, will you help me? Yoruchi threw her head back and erupted into a breathy laughter. An unlikely scenario, but sure. I'll whoop that brat's ass and make him love you again. Momo revealed a grateful smile. Her request wasn't to force him to love her again, it was to end her life. But she liked Yoruchi's suggestion too. Thank you, Yoruchi-ne-san. Yoruchi simply shook her head. Her nose scrunched, picking up a scorched scent. Momo, how would you rate Rukia's culinary skills? No idea. I'd never seen her cook. Yoruchi's brows twitched. Why didn't you tell me earlier? Evening. Walking across the dark hallway, Yoruchi transformed into her human form and opened the door. Her cat eyes patiently observed the man standing before her. Dressed in spotless shihakusho garments with such nobility, those shallow aristocrats could only strive for. The only flaw on his perfect countenance was a subtle hint of exhaustion. She felt weird to see him not smiling or grinning like a fool. Being so familiar with him, she could easily see exhaustion from the way he carried himself and the lack of energy in his eyes. He couldn't have gotten that type of training from her, could he? Yoruchi pierced him with a seething glare. Unable to contain herself, she leaned closer and took a sniff of his clothes. The lack of unohana, or any feminine scent, on him cleared her doubts away. He simply felt worn out from overexerting himself. He pushed her face away. No need to be the jealous housewife. I won't lie if I fuck someone behind your back. A pleased smile made its way to her face, and she hummed. A lot of toughness from a man who looks so defeated. Unohana must have hooped you like a dog. Let's just say something happened, and I was stabbed in the chest. The lack of sarcasm on his face or voice wiped the aura of playfulness around her. She tugged his robes this way and that, loosening them enough to see his chest. There were no scars to be found. Your natural regeneration is just silly. Wait, do I also regenerate like you now? He wrestled control of his clothes and fixed his appearance. Gosh, you didn't have to undress me in the open. She pulled him inside and shut the door. Answer my question, sweetheart. Or I'll cut open my wrist and report you for domestic violence. He shrugged as if he couldn't care less. Go ahead. Her brows twitched at his cold-hearted answer. Come on, say it. I want to know my limits. You probably won't, he said with a thoughtful look. Remember, you're a Shinigami with a hollow. Not a complete hollow. A look of disappointment flashed on her face, which was replaced by a confident smirk. Will it be worth it to become a complete hollow? She saw a flash in his eyes. The pause in his actions told him that he was imagining her naked with a hollow mask and more lethality. Oh, sweetheart, she whispered, pressing herself against his chest and looking up with a cheeky smirk. Can you be a little less transparent with your depraved thoughts? He flicked her forehead. I won't let you become a complete hollow. His serious rebuke had her speechless for a moment. Instead of explaining his reasoning in a more detailed fashion, he walked past her. She flash-stepped to cut him off. There is warm water in the bath. Take a quick dip while I heat up dinner. He patted her small back with a warm smile. It's refreshing to have you as my wife. Keep dreaming. A brazen laughter shook her chest, the corner of her eyes crinkling happily. Don't take too long, kiddo. I'm dying to know why Unohana stabbed you. Chapter 275, Nature. The sliding shoji screens, adorned with delicate cherry blossom patterns, allowed slivers of moonlight to filter onto the muted tatami mats. When paired with the faint light of the delicate paper lanterns and the elegant low table, it invoked an intimate atmosphere. This serene setting, however, was disrupted when Kazuya and Yoruichi took their seats at the table. Between them sat a plate of steaming delicacies, their aroma nearly making his stomach growl. Yeah, I'm a little skeptical about this. He put on a brave expression as he eyed the delicacies. But if it's for my dearest wife, I'll gladly put my life on the line and eat food that's clearly not made for human consumption. Swallowing down food with radioactive seasoning was a small price to pay for Yoruichi's happiness. Yoruichi tapped her fingers on the table. I had Rukia and Momo help me this time. Although things started rocky with Rukia, they could recover and create some positive memories, at least Yoruichi did. She suspected Rukia didn't share the same sentiment. Frankly, it was Rukia's fault for making a glorious mess out of the kitchen. Kazuya's eyebrows rose in surprise. Damn. They returned without seeing me. More like Rukia dragged Momo away. Rukia looked like she was fighting the urge to spend more time with you. Lass made the tough decision to prioritize her future over you. As her boyfriend, I'm pleased with her priorities, he said, lips slowly curving into a cold smile. After all, she knows she'll be spending the rest of her life in my basement, as my lovely wife. Yoruichi shook her head, unable to discern if he was joking or serious. You do realize that kind of talk would provoke Byakuya to fight you to death, right? That lad becomes protective for family, or he used to be. I'm not sure anymore. Still considered an exile, she hadn't introduced herself to Byakuya and the rest of her people in the Soul Society. She had seen Yashiro, her brother, from a distance, and he was holding up pretty well on his own. He cracked his knuckles. I'll sit Byakuya down with just my right fist. Yeah, I don't doubt that for a second. Yoruichi chuckled, propping her elbow on her thigh and leaning her chin on her palm. You'll not believe the things that happened behind your back. The very memories of her little adventure with Rukia and Momo had her grinning silly. Kazuya leaned forward, intrigued to hear her mischievous activities behind his back. Seems like you all had a blast without me. Care to share some snippets? I will, after you share why Unohana attempted to murder you. She needed to know if her friend committed some grave mistake to incur Unohana's wrath, or if it was just a slip-up during their training. He let out a deep sigh. I'd appreciate it if you showed a little more concern for your husband. You survived the soul-shredding process of reincarnation, then you survived Aizen. A tough bastard like you'll live through anything. At this point, I'm more concerned about the deity who is working overtime to save your ass. Someone finally recognized my hard work. Partner, I demand a raise. You don't even have a salary. I do. It's watching you. For the raise, I want 5 stuck to each other like a glue hugs and 3 French kisses on top of my current salary. You can have it. Yay! So happy. Father, who is this woman? The happy-go-lucky Nami quite flabbergasted Tsubasa. Kazuya gave a nod as he spoke. Yeah, the only deity in this world is the Soul King. I think I'm related to him. Related to Ryo? Yoruichi asked, wide-eyed. You're pulling my leg, aren't you? Not even Yoruichi believed him, that's just how absurd his words were. The Soul King was the epitome of power and authority in the Soul Society, a ruler that people never saw but believed in, regardless. Well, it's a little complicated. I'll tell you everything when I have verified it myself. Her gaze sharpened as she pointed at his face. You'd better. Anyway, what did you do to Unohana? Did you try to make a move on her, or did you piss her off? Wow, you're doubting your husband. What happened to the unwavering trust between couples? She clicked her tongue, looking mighty annoyed by his playful antics. Stop going off topic. Unohana won't try to kill you for no reason. There is a reason, he said with a sigh, his gaze distant. You know Unohana's past, right? Gathering information is on Mitsukido's specialty. I was the head of that organization. There aren't many influential people I'm not familiar with here. Oh yeah. I sometimes forget my lazy cat wife used to be a badass assassin. For the love of Ryo, stop calling me your wife. Yoruichi snapped, giving him what felt like a final ultimatum. As for Unohana's past, is there a reason to bring it up? Unohana has reformed and became a healer to make up for her past actions. She hasn't been involved with violence for centuries. There was even one case where she healed a vicious criminal because she didn't want him to die. Although she wasn't the closest to Unohana, she had been on the receiving end of Unohana's kindness many times. Apart from a few occasional slip-ups in her Ryatsu, Unohana had been the definition of a kind soul. Reform? Kazuya chuckled. Can a cat stop meowing and start barking? Confusion clouded Yoruichi's face. What are you implying? It's cat's nature to meow. And it's Unohana's nature to fight a bloody battle. She can suppress her nature, but she can never get rid of it. She'll always live and die for violence. Does that paint the picture for you? Yoruichi nodded slowly, somewhat unfocused. I don't get the vague metaphors. Tell me the whole damn story. Then listen closely because I'm not going over it again. Chapter 276, Vicious Attack. Half an hour ago, Kazuya basked in bliss from the soft sensation of Unohana's thighs beneath his head. The gentle lap pillow was his reward for surviving the extreme training, which Unohana promised him back at his home. Unohana agreeing to his request was not on his list of surprises today. She pinched his cheeks gently. Is this enough? I have to check back on my squad too, after I bathe. He placed his hands over hers. No. I'm still tired. Let me relax a bit more on my future wife's lap. She made a troubled expression before letting out a sigh. Since he had to leave tomorrow, she was spoiling him a little. She might have given too much leniency. My Shihakusho is drenched in sweat. There's your blood on my clothes, too. How this is relaxing for you in any capacity is beyond my comprehension. Doesn't make you any less attractive, he whispered, kissing her palm. I quite enjoy spending time with my future wife. You probably don't, I guess. But you'll learn to appreciate small intimate moments one day, that's my promise. Small moments. She raised her head, contemplating his words. Kazuya closed his eyes and let the older woman digest his promise in peace. Rolling around, he found a more comfortable position. Exhausted from the long training, he didn't take long before the loving arms of slumber embraced him. His peaceful rest lasted a while but came to an unfortunate end by the distinct sound of a katana sliding out of its sheath. The sound was subtle, but it may as well have been the howl of a wolf against his ears. Before he could open his eyes, an overwhelming bloodlust enveloped his entire being, wrapping him in its cold, hostile domain. A sharp pain in his chest followed the bloodlust. "Ku!" He groaned, his eyes flying open to the gloomy smile of Unohana beneath the dark sky. Her hands gripped the katana protruding from his chest. "Aretsu, what the hell?" he asked incredulously, the blood rushing up his throat and filling his mouth. "Oi, don't be crazy." Rather than listening to him, she forcibly pulled the katana, blood spurting from the gaping wound in his chest. She raised the katana over him and stabbed him again, aiming for his heart. He barely caught the katana between his hands. "Retsu, snap out of it." The katana slipped from Unohana's grasp, landing with a dull thud on Kazuya's chest. Her eyes widened as she took in the sight of blood trickling from the corner of his mouth and the blood-stained blade. The familiar green glow of Kaido enveloped her hands as she began to heal him. Not even a scar was left when Kaido and his natural regeneration worked on the wound together. "What happened here?" she asked, despite understanding the crux of the matter. "Did I do this?" Kazuya focused, allowing a tiny amount of Ryatsu to envelop him. It clung to the excess materials on his clothes before shooting off in the shape of a blood-red bullet. He sat up and dusted his clothes. "If you're referring to the injury you just healed, yeah, you did." His hand found the tear in her shahakusho, fingers grazing her thigh. "You stabbed right through me." Though he had anticipated Unohana might attack him someday, he hadn't expected it so soon. Somehow his involvement had made her violent tendencies worse than her anime counterpart, that too by a long shot at that. "This is what you get for sleeping on a madwoman's lap," Nami spoke with an edge in her voice. "Partner, there is still time to ditch her route. I thought she was your idol." "Still is. Unohana pressed a hand to her forehead, looking a little lost. "Just what am I doing?" She vividly remembered a sound, like that of shattering of glass, when she saw him sleeping so peacefully on her lap. Little did she know it was the sound of her dark urges breaking out of its shackles. In her carelessness, she had tried to assassinate the last hope of the Soul Society. A gentle pinch on her thighs brought her attention to the present. She looked down to Kazuya caressing her thigh through her torn hakama. "Hey, don't beat yourself up. I'll treat it like a valuable training lesson." She brushed his hand away and stood. Frictionlessly sliding the katana out of its sheath, she placed it against his neck, which made him raise a brow in surprise. "It's not your fault. You were sleeping and vulnerable. And I tried to kill you. It's inexcusable." Clenching her trembling fists, she pointed the sword to her own neck before bringing it down to the middle of her chest, right where she had stabbed him. "An eye for an eye. A wound for a wound. Kazuya, take the sword and drive it into my chest." His eyes flicked from the sword's handle to her face, not a hint of emotion on his face. She pushed the sword towards him. "You can heal me afterward." "What's the point of it then?" "To even the suffering caused by my weak will." More so than the physical pain, she craved punishment. Any form of punishment would do as long as it held her responsible for her violence. He grabbed the sword and tossed it aside before bringing her into his arms, all in an instant. Stunned by his actions, she stared up at his charming face. "I knew your murderous side, and I still slept like a log on your lap. Can you blame yourself for my lack of caution?" Frustration welled up in Unohana, her bottom lip caught between her teeth. Anybody else in his situation would freak out and leave her alone. But he had the audacity to treat it like just another day in his life. The whole situation made her wonder if his head was in the right place. "Say something," he whispered. "Or I'll touch you." Unohana punched his belly. "Don't you dare blame me if this happens again." "This? You mean by this warm hug?" He tightened his hold, pressing her against his chest. "I'll gladly welcome it." She shoved him away, her eyes frosty. "I'm not joking. Next time I lose control, it won't end up with one wound. I might kill you. He erupted into a hearty laughter. Retsu, don't overestimate yourself. If I'm serious, not even two of you can take me down. For you, I may as well be an immortal. I have made immortals crawl at my feet, begging for death. Unohana whispered, slowly walking toward her Zanpakuto. As she picked it up from the ground, she glanced over her shoulder, her eyes gleaming with malice. Immortality doesn't come with resistance to pain. Even if it did, my sword will burn through everything and make you regret ever claiming immortality. Kazuya crossed his arms before holding up his chin. Ah, you're talking about your Bankai. All the seriousness faded from her face, her eyes widening in shock. How do you know? He flash-stepped to her back and rested his hand on her shoulder. Retsu, I know everything there is to know about you. Chapter 277, Progress. Anyone interested can start reading at $10. And that's how it ended. Yoruichi stared at him for a good moment. His audacity to flirt with Unohana and being so nonchalant about everything had her dumbstruck. He ignored her and dug into the food, devouring plate after plate, everything like a certain spiky hair main character. Ah, that was wonderful. Yoruichi shook her head. Say thanks to Aizen later. Huh? Why? She pointed at the dishes on the table. She paid for all the ingredients. Yoruichi told him all about her day. The small confrontation with Rukia at the start, and then she briefly glanced over as her bonding moment with Momo. Then she scolded Rukia for almost burning down the kitchen and forcing Rukia to clean up the whole mess. After all that, they left the house together to buy some supplies, only to find that none of the shop owners put payments on the tab. Aizen's timely appearance in the market had saved them from returning home empty-handed. Kazuya hummed as he listened to Yoruichi. Aizen doesn't deserve thanks for that, she deserves a whole night of love. Anyway, let's call it a night. I gotta wake up early tomorrow. Yoruichi yawned as she stretched like a cat. Night? What night? You're coming with me. Who else will be my pillow, huh? He grabbed her tail and dragged her to the bedroom. Reading books by himself was one of Aizen's favorite pastimes. The constant stream of ideas and knowledge helped him keep up with the current world. The evolution of books also let him glimpse into the progress. There had been no major change in the Seriidii Bulletin, the biggest publishers in the Soul Society, a stark contrast to the ever-evolving books of the living world. A comparison between the histories of both realms would tell the truth behind the Soul Society's stagnation. One realm suffered wars on a massive scale, and the other only went through one defining conflict over the last millennia, the Quincy. The Soul Society needed a new god. One that wasn't beloved by people but despised by them. An infallible tyrant god. And only he could fill the role of such a being and guide the Soul Society to a better future. Captain Aizen, I'm back. Jin's abrupt appearance put Aizen's musing to an end. The ever-smiling Viper shuffled across the room. Closing the book, Aizen raised his head. Welcome back. Any report worth paying attention to? There is, Jin said, crossing his oversized sleeves on his chest. There's a hot one you'll want to know, Captain Aizen. Aizen put the book back on the shelf as Jin relayed the information he had gotten from his informants scattered through the Soul Society. Even though Aizen had zero trust in Jin, every piece of information brought by Jin turned out valid. The old man is sending someone to gather information in Hueco Mundo. It's a secret expedition. He is assessing Arankars to be a grave threat to the balance, as expected. Do we have any names? Why would I call the news hot without the names? Jin said with a smirk. It's Captain Soifan and your favorite rookie, Kazuya Ishihara. Interesting. Very interesting of them to trust him. Jin rubbed his hands, expecting. The boy is already going places. Isn't it better to take care of him now? No. We won't touch him. Aizen shook his head. I won't mind you informing our people in Hueco Mundo to give him a hard time. It was better for Kazuya and Soifan to stay busy in Hueco Mundo. The less powerful people stayed in the Soul Society, the less friction Aizen would face in executing his plan. Jin grinned. Oh, I'll make sure he has the time of his life there. How are they going to enter Hueco Mundo for this task? Asked Tozen, whose presence was completely ignored until now. Outside of royal guards, do Shinigami even have a way to enter Hueco Mundo, and will the Senkuman Gate only work within the living world and the Soul Society? The only known method to enter Hueco Mundo was through Garganta. To rip open a hole in Garganta, one had to be a hollow. Jin rubbed his chin. That's a million-yen question. Captain Mayuri Kuratsuchi, Aizen whispered the name of Kasuke's spiritual successor. He must have found a way through dissecting Arrancar's corpses. We cannot underestimate him. Aizen would have been wary of Mayuri without Kasuke's mentorship. The maniacal scientist had no ethical or moral boundaries. In a sense, Mayuri could prove to be a worse enemy than Kasuke. Jin scoffed. That nut job. I dread the day someone from our side has to fight him. I have not accomplished much these past days, Tozen whispered. Captain Aizen, you have something planned for me, right? Yeah. Aizen nodded. You'll play the role of my messenger tomorrow. Chapter 278, Not Enough Fluffy. Partner, wake up. Kazuya's eyes fluttered open at Nami's gentle touch. She sat by the bedside, her divine form partially eclipsing the moon's glow from the window. On any other night, he would have hooped Nami's ass for this disruption. But tonight, he had granted her special privilege to ruin his sleep. Nami's fingers traced his forehead, her smile soft in the dim light. Unohana won't say no to me. I could go in your place. I have to do it myself. As he attempted to rise, he found himself anchored by Yoruichi's arm draped across his chest. She clung to his side like she wouldn't let go no matter what. He may have dragged her into the bed, but she liked using him as her plushie more than he did, at least during her sleep. Nami snickered. She does that after rejecting a relationship for the 100th time. Partner, I know the best way to convince Yoruichi. Push her down and tame her with your D. Easy now, he said, running his fingers through Yoruichi's hair, trying to ease her into letting go. She lived all her life without romance. She needs more time to adjust. Even Yoruichi could no longer deny her feelings for him. She just needed a little more time to grow accustomed to this dynamic, where she was more than just a friend to someone. Pet, she whispered as her eyes lazily opened. Pet. With another mumble, she nuzzled into his chest, and her breathing grew soft. She had drifted back to sleep in the comfort of his, or rather her pet's presence. This wasn't the first time he had seen Yoruichi's hollow taking over during the night. She left herself too vulnerable when she slept by his side, a typical habit of cats relying on others in the group to keep an eye out for threats. This cute little thing. Although his first meeting with her hollow was far from great, he had warmed up to her cute antics. He didn't mind its presence as long as it acted within its boundary, which was never attempting a forced possession of Yoruichi's body. Release me and go to sleep, he whispered in Yoruichi's cat ears, and her right ear twitched in response. I said release me and go to sleep. Yoruichi's hollow succumbed to the power of charm and loosened her grip around him. He gently disentangled himself from her arms and stepped off the bed before draping a blanket over her. Nami wrapped her arms around his waist, glancing up at him from her seated position. Someone learned to tame bad kitties. Or should I say baddies and kitties? Both works, he said with a faint smirk. Do you want to be tamed too? Haha. Partner truly looks the most charming when abusing your natural gifts. He stroked her hair affectionately. I thought I had a weird fetish, but you're in a league of your own. She dismissed his comment with a soft giggle. Standing up, she reached up and unbuttoned his shirt with a deliberate slowness. I like every side of partner. But if I had to pick, I'll go with a moderate evil version with a balance of smarts and violence. Oh? Which version am I currently playing? The good guy, of course. Nami looked away with a pout that looked outlandishly adorable on her regal face. You haven't been evil ever since you entered the Soul Society. There was that fight with Byakuya. It was an exception, not the norm. He patted her back in the most comforting way. It's just the circumstances that made me. I'll be plenty evil for you in the future. Now, can you watch over Yoruichi while I'm gone? Babysitting feral kitties isn't exactly my forte, partner. She glanced at the sleeping Yoruichi and shook her head. She is so unreasonable. I'd be really down if she was cute, fluffy, and miowaii. Gosh, I'm gonna have to wait another few centuries to find a little catgirl pillow. I'm talking about your daughter with her, partner. She got along exceptionally with Yoruichi, however, the same couldn't be said for Yoruichi's hollow. The feral entity had only one person in its eyes, her pet. The rest of the world may as well be invisible to her senses. Kazuya planted a kiss on Nami's cheek. You're the alpha of hollows. The future god empress. How can you let a feral cat intimidate you? Her eyes widened as she realized her uncharacteristically spineless behavior. She took his hands and placed them on her cheeks. A smile bloomed on her face. I know you're blatantly manipulating me into this, but I can't help it, you know. Your compliments fill to the brim with joy, and also, my title is Destined Empress of Heavens now. He leaned down and pressed his lips against hers. A brief contact of their lips was all it needed to make her grin ear to ear with confidence. I'm gonna get ready then, current Empress of Happiness. The title got a good chuckle out of her. Go without worry, for I, Izanami no Makoto, shall protect this kitten with my very life. He flashed her a thumbs-up gesture before heading towards the bath. Chapter 279, Pushing Boundaries. Half an hour later. Kazuya landed silently in Unohana's backyard, which proved to be a waste of effort. The back door was open, and Unohana was moon-gazing with a cup of sake in her hand, reflecting on the events that had spiraled out of her control. The matter weighed heavily on her heart, despite his best attempt to ease her guilt. Her lips curled into a soft smile at the sight of him. One stab didn't satisfy you enough? Alas, I'm not in the mood to indulge your fetishes. Her voice was filled with a feeling of deep sorrow as if she truly regretted disappointing him tonight. She raised the sake cup. You're welcome to join me on this sleepless night, however. He settled down by her side, immediately noticing the subtle notes of fruity sake mixing with her scent. She had been drinking for a while, the proof of which was evident from the 3 empty bottles on the low table behind them. All the alcohol only made her cheeks a bit flushed. Since when did Retsu become an alcoholic? I'm celebrating your survival, she replied, her voice dripping with sarcasm as she pushed the cup toward him. Will you accept a treat from a woman who tried to assassinate you in your sleep? Before she could finish, he took the cup and downed the sake in one motion. He tossed the cup on her lap and wiped lips with his thumb. Actually, not bad. You have a good taste in sake. Unohana slowly shook her head as if she had expected him to react in this fashion. I'm still unhappy about earlier. In that case, what can I do to make you happy? Ending me. She whispered, more to herself than conveying her emotions. Are you here to nag at me? I do have that right, as your future husband. She slammed the sake cup on the tatami floor, shattering it into bits. Enough. I have seen enough. I have heard enough. It is time you stop calling yourself my future husband, or I will. As much as she adored him, there was no world in which she would marry anyone, much less the desired man of Aizen. Because there was no happiness for the man she would choose. Only misery of becoming her target, someone she would fight to death while laughing like a maniac. Hic, an unintentional hiccup destroyed her serious demeanor. She pressed her thumb against her throat, which got rid of her hiccups for good. I was saying, on one condition, he said, looking at her in earnest. Become my present wife. No. Kazuya clicked his tongue. It was worth a try. Silence settled between them. Kazuya refrained from mentioning his original purpose for coming here. He had to address Unohana's situation before leaving Soul Society. Leaving her in her current state could lead to some disastrous consequences. As he contemplated how to help her, she pushed her sheathed katana towards him. "I'll consider marriage if you hold me accountable for my mistake." He drew the katana, letting the curved blade soak in the moonlight. "This weapon has been through a lot of battles. Still looks so pristine. It kind of reminds me of you. A woman older than the current human calendar, yet still so beautiful." She barely reacted to his flowery words, which he had completely expected. "I pried its Asachi from a noble's cold fingers," she whispered, gazing up at the moon as if recalling nearly faded memories. A young noble and his entourage leaving the safety of their estate to kill criminals. To earn recognition from his family. His misfortune was to encounter me of all criminals. Before the Godai 13th's formation, nobles used to regulate the criminals' activity in Rakongai, or so they tried. The number of outlaws in Rakongai vastly outnumbered the nobles. The nobles only killed the criminals close to their territories and let the innocent suffer in Rakongai. The old Rakongai was far more violent than today. "Back when my future wife used to be a delinquent," Kazuya mused, inspecting her katana. "What was life like back then? Delinquent? I was a criminal. The strongest of them all until Unohana cut herself off, shaking her head. I might return to my former life without this favor. Kazuya, I can only rely on you. Use the sword on me." She would stab herself if it yielded the same result. But it had to be him. He slid her katana back into its sheath. "My answer is still no. Did you not say you have feelings for me? Are you happy seeing the woman you adore devolve into a lowly criminal?" Left with no choice, she resorted to using his feelings to manipulate him, the one area where he could write a thesis and be her master. He placed a hand on her thigh and turned to face her with a solemn look. "Listen, punishing yourself won't address the root cause of your concern. It'll just be a band-aid solution." Her hunger for violence had been relatively tame until he arrived and gave her a taste of what she had forgotten. Her former addiction had returned in full force. Now, she struggled to control her urges and couldn't be satisfied with mere mock battles. She craved more. She craved blood. She craved slaughter. Worst of all, there was no cure for her condition. Even his charm ability could only temporarily help her regain control, it couldn't permanently erase her desire for violence. "Maybe my complete resurrection can." He, however, couldn't experiment until he returned from Hueco Mundo. Her brows furrowed at his words. "Do you know of a permanent solution? Other than letting you indulge in violence?" "Nope." She stared at him for a long moment, as though expecting more. When he remained silent, she continued, "Then help me with the temporary solution." She slightly shifted the tail of her braid, exposing the scar hiding beneath. "Don't drag it out unnecessarily." He let out a heavy sigh. "Retsu, you're stronger than that." "I am not." "You saw it with your own eyes. I may be able to slay a Vasto Lord with my sword, but I can't control myself when it matters. Please, I do not wish to let Aizen see me in that state." Wrapping an arm around her shoulder, he drew her closer. "You held it off for centuries and became a better person. That alone deserves some credit. And you're still trying to overcome it." She forcefully shut her eyes, her jaw clenched. "Even now my heart is throbbing, my fingers are twitching to hold my zanpakuto and cut you. Just do me this favor, you stubborn kid." He barely flinched at her confession. "My future wife has some issues." "Oh well, nothing I can't fix." "You cannot fix what's not broken," she growled. "That is why, after this is over, I want—" He pulled her even closer and pressed his hand against her mouth, silencing her from uttering any ominous foreshadowing. "Retsu, stop thinking about it. You'll forget everything about the incident for 2 days." Using the full effect of his ability, which he had only used once on Apache, he attempted to make her forget the incident for 2 days. He had no idea how much of a success this would be, or if it would even last for an hour. Unohana's wide eyes grew distant before gently closing. When she opened her eyes again, they were clouded by confusion. I must have blanked out. Kazuya pumped his fist behind his back. Smiling, he said, "You drank too much sake, probably." She put her hands between them and retreated from him. "You didn't tell me why you came here. Take me to the living world. I'm going to need Haribel and Hueco Mundo." Chapter 280, Recruitment, I. In the twilight hours, when the world lay hushed and still, Francesca Mila Rose would often be caught in a restless dance between wakefulness and slumber. The accumulated weariness from the rigorous training with Apache and Visored would force her to sleep about the whole day on the living room's couch, leaving her wide awake at night. Whenever she found herself unable to sleep, which she usually did, she would roll around in the bed, tune into the television, and then take a nap and repeat until the sunlight spilled through the window. Her lusterless night schedule couldn't fill the gap left in her heart by Kazuya, and to a certain extent, Surachi. She could understand Kazuya's absence from her side, but Surachi. Her old friend had moved into her own room to look after her precious little kittens. The memory of Surachi's departure still stung whenever she found herself alone in her room. It was like a thorn embedded in the proud flesh of her soul. "You can stay here with them," Mila Rose had pleaded to Surachi. "I won't eat them, I promise." "Francesca, you don't stay still when you sleep. You're gonna crush my kittens if we stay together." Mila Rose had tried every trick that day, from throwing a tantrum to acting cutesy. Yet nothing could put a dent in Surachi's determination. The fierce adopter of kittens had made it her life's purpose to protect them. Suffice to say, Mila Rose would lose most of her cheerfulness without true companionship. Today, too, she was lying on her bed, hoping to fall asleep watching the most mundane weather recaps of drama shows. Yet even as her eyelids grew heavy, sleep remained just beyond her grasp. As if summoned by her yearning for companionship, a familiar scent wafted through the open window, carried on by the night breeze. In an instant, Mila Rose's senses stirred, her nose twitching as she inhaled her true companion's aroma. Kazu! Grinning with joy, she struggled to contain a shiver of excitement. She jumped off her bed and crouched on the ground. Then she launched herself at the open window in a perfect trajectory like an arrow let loose by a bow. Outside, the garden below became a blur of shadows as she pumped her legs with Ryatsu, as much as she could conjure inside her Jigai body, and transitioned her dive into a makeshift Sonito step. The speed boost allowed her to fly straight at the young man, who quietly walked through the garden in hopes of staying low profile. He obviously noticed her and let out a sigh of defeat before taking a stance to brace himself. She crashed into him with all the force of a meteor striking the earth. Thud! With an audible crash, they both tumbled into the bushes. Mila Rose, triumphant in her goal, pinned Kazuya beneath her, her eyes gleaming with a primal hunger that sent shivers down his spine. "Rose, what the hell are you doing?" She hugged his neck and rubbed her face against his own before affectionately licking his cheek like a cat. "Who are you trying to hide from, love?" A smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. "It's impossible for me to hide from you, isn't it?" "Haha. You shouldn't even try that, mate." Mila Rose smirked smugly and tapped her forehead. "Your scent is stored here. I can sniff you out from another town." He could hide his Ryatsu, but he couldn't cover up his scent. Well, he could, but it would take too much effort, and there would still be a chance of his efforts failing in the face of a creature of instinct like her. Shaking his head in fond exasperation at her extraordinary capabilities, Kazuya gently pinched her cheeks. "My sharp-nosed lady, why exactly are you up this late?" "Couldn't sleep," Mila Rose confessed, her hands brushing his chest as if to memorize the very shape of his body. She raised herself and licked her lips like she had seen the most scrumptious feast of her life. "Now, I don't want to sleep. Rose, not here. Anyone on the street can see us. I have done more shameful things with you and Snake," she said in an assertive voice and gripped his collar. "Do you think I give a fuck now, huh?" She could drag him back to the sanctuary of her room, a more private place, where the equally passionate Sung-sun could foil her plans. Or she could give in to the wild urgings of her heart and claim him here. The stupidly courageous lioness chose the latter. Recognizing the futility of resistance, Kazuya's hands found their way to her waist. No, probably not. I've taken away all your shame if there was any in the first place. She threw her head back and laughed boisterously. I'm the alpha lioness. How can I leave the pride with you if I shy away from everything? He couldn't help but nod, acknowledging the truth in her words. Valid reason. I'll let you win this time. She had let Sōsuke take away her 20 minutes in their last meeting. It would be criminal of him to not give her some bits of happiness. I love how my mate puts up zero resistance. She leaned down and gripped his chin before giving a peck on his lips. I'll have so much fun riding you till sunrise. I don't have that much time, Kazuya replied with a gentle smile, tempering her expectations even as desire coursed through him. Let's end it in 15 minutes. Huh? Chapter 281 through 282, Recruitment, Part 2 and 3. The moon continued its celestial journey, witnessing the passionate 15 minutes in its entirety. During these 15 minutes, the whole mansion stirred, and everyone was awakened by Mila Rose's shenanigans. When Kazuya entered the house with Mila Rose clinging to him, he saw all of his hollow lovers. Haribel, Apache, Sung-sun, Lisa, Sōsuke. Even Izumi had joined everyone. Only the basement dwellers, Stark, Lillinette, and Minoli, were missing. In all likelihood, they didn't want to end their sleep early, and nobody could blame them. None of his lovers seemed angry at his abrupt appearance except for Lisa. She glared at him like she wanted to pluck out his eyeballs and play marbles with them. He promptly ignored the malevolent energy oozing from Lisa and smiled at his loyal maid on duty. After sensing his Ryatsu, Apache had switched to her maid dress to welcome him. Such devotion was commendable in his eyes. Apache's frown oozed barely concealed jealousy, his appreciative gaze having no impact on her demeanor at all. Shameless. While she had the heart to let them finish their intimate activities where anybody could see them, she clearly held a grudge against him. Sung-sun snickered behind her sleeve. You reek of jealousy, dear. The taunt ignited Apache's temper, and she threw a punch at Sung-sun's face. Her fist roared through the empty air as Sung-sun nimbly ducked under it. The snake-eyed Arrancar stepped behind Lisa, using her friend as a shield. You're a degenerate at your core, Apache. Does it scare you? Does it make you want to cry, little girl? Do you want to boo-hoo? Apache gritted her teeth. Coward. Face me like a man. I am a woman, Sung-sun said, her tongue darting out playfully. We both are. Unless. With a look of triumph, Sung-sun turned to Lisa and patted her shoulder. Lisa-chan, it seems to me you have some words for my husband? I do. Lisa crossed her arms, eyes narrowing behind her glasses. How will he compensate me for ruining my beauty sleep? Kazuya cleared his throat. Let's discuss that later. I'm here for an important reason. Like doing us all on the same bed? Mila Rose said, holding a look of anticipation in her eyes. I'd be down for that, honestly. Although she had her favorites in the family like Haribel and Sōsuke, she considered everyone here a part of her pride. Ever since accepting Kazuya as her mate, the idea of pleasing him with the others in her pride felt as natural as sharing his affection with them. What? Apache exclaimed, her trembling finger pointing at Mila Rose. How can you suggest that so casually? Casually, Kazuya placed a finger on Mila Rose's lips. No fighting for my sake. Be quiet and hear me out. Mila Rose's defiant expression softened under his calm authority, and she gave a slow nod in response. K. Kazuya ruffled her hair before turning to everyone. Different levels of curiosity and anticipation were etched on their faces, and their full attention was on him, waiting for the reveal like children waiting for their parents to unwrap the gifts. A smile reached his face. I'm here to enlist everyone for a war. Haribel's eyes narrowed slightly, the realization dawning on her. Is it time? Yup. He confirmed with a nod. We're going to establish an everlasting empire in Hueco Mundo. A chorus of cheers erupted from the group of Apache, Sung-sun, Mila Rose, and even Surachi. They began whispering to each other passionately, forgetting their prior arguments. Only Izumi remained quiet, a flicker of confusion crossing her face, understandable since she had yet to hear his plans for Hueco Mundo. Apache cracked her knuckles with a vicious grin. Finally a chance to pummel some sense in those idiot Arancars. Mila Rose laughed. My fingers have been itching for a real battle. I'm gonna crack open their skulls and stuff some humanity inside. Surachi brandished her whip, a sadistic smile on her face. I'll see to Espada's demise myself. Sun watched her friends and shook her head. I'm more excited about helping my husband. It'll be my first battle as his beloved wife. I must give my all and prove my worth outside of his bedroom. The last part made Apache blush as she took a glance at Kazuya. He pretended not to notice her meaningful gaze and maintained his serious expression. Lisa pushed up her glasses. Am I allowed to join in on the fun? From her calm expression, one wouldn't imagine her head being full of conflicting thoughts such as I shouldn't be part of a Hollow's war, aren't I a half Hollow, and I don't care about it. She couldn't change her overthinking nature. Of course, Sun said. Who else will have my back out there? Treat me to some ramen later, yeah? Sun winked at Kazuya. I'll invite husband to make him pay. A crazy idea. I'm really down for it. The pair exchanged a lively high five, acting as if they weren't going to war with some of the most powerful Hollows in existence. He was partially to be blamed as the two ladies considered themselves to be untouchable by his side. He had to do everything in his power to maintain this unshakable belief. Harabelle stepped forward, the sound of her slippers making everyone silent. Kazuya, let's make sure no deaths are involved. She wanted to build a haven for Hollows, to end the cycle of endless violence, while avoiding any sacrifices. It was asking too much of her lover, she knew, but she also knew that only he could pull it off. What may be miraculous to many was just a tiny bit of trouble to him. Kazuya nodded solemnly. We'll incapacitate those who don't want to surrender. Still, we can't avoid death entirely. Some deaths will be outside of our control. The flicker of regret in his eyes told of the conflict within. Mercy toward enemies was not his first instinct, but he understood the need to maintain balance. Killing many Arancars might draw the attention of the royal guards. For this, he needed Harabelle and the others' support. The upcoming battles would give everyone a chance to get stronger and potentially evolve in a safe environment. As for Aizen, he wasn't worried at all. The recent events had painted Aizen as a mistrustful man in Yamamoto's eyes. A cunning man like Aizen would avoid leaving the Soul Society until the heat around him died. Now was the perfect chance to strike and cripple Aizen's influence in Hueco Mundo. Harabelle breathed a sigh of relief. I trust you, Kazuya. When do we leave? At dawn, he said, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. And no provoking the Espada in my absence. Kazuya proceeded to hand them every piece of information required to execute his plan. For the next few minutes, the room remained silent save for his voice. Harabelle, Apache, Sun, and Surachi listened with an unwavering focus, while Lisa and Mila Rose didn't bother with the strategic warfare as they felt content listening to orders. Point me in the direction, and I'll rip anyone to pieces for you, was Mila Rose's justification. She simply had no desire or patience to stress her little brain for overcomplicated tasks. Lisa's justification: I'd rather not waste my energy on this. I trust you, and Harabelle fitted her laid-back personality. Kazuya's gaze fell on Izumi, who stood off to the side, an unspoken sadness in her eyes. She longed to join them in this warfare as she had qualifications to be a great war asset against Hollows. She had Quincy powers of a pure-blood Quincy, her raw capabilities reaching the Jillian class of Hollows. However, her powers would kill Hollows, which went against the very foundation of this war. He walked over to her side and whispered a soft hey in her ears. Hey, Otuo-kun, she replied, a forced cheer in her voice. I'll watch over the place while everyone's gone. She could have protested, could have begged to join him, but she chose to swallow her desire and be more open to his wishes. And he wished for her to stay behind, otherwise, he would have asked her to join him by now. Thanks, Izumi. I'll make it up to you later. She giggled at his compliment. It's fine, Otudo. You've done so much for me. Let me repay you in some form. She trailed her words and fidgeted with her fingers. Though I wouldn't mind going on a date with Otudo. She tried to act reserved, yet when it came down to it, she couldn't stop her desires from slipping out. He couldn't help but chuckle. All right. As he talked, or rather, flirted with Izumi, Apache grabbed his hand and dragged him away. Apache? She moved into his arms and gave him a hug that would put bears to shame. But as quickly as she'd embraced him, she pulled back, looking flustered. Sorry. I don't know what came over me. Kazuya smiled, shaking his head. No need to apologize. No, I brought you here to tell you something important, she said, regaining her composure. I don't know why I hugged you like that. He knew the reason. Her aspect of death, devotion, was growing stronger. He refrained from explaining anything and let her decipher the truth for herself. Like I said, it's fine. He stroked her face. What's so important? Neliel came here yesterday. She said she is moving to Hueco Mundo. Nell? Kazuya's brow furrowed in thought. Wasn't she busy with her tiny hollows? I asked her about that. But she didn't say anything. She seemed sad. A look of concern crossed his features. I'll meet her there. Apache nodded, biting her lip as if struggling with something. Kazuya. Yeah? It's nothing. She shook her head and lowered her gaze to the floor, then looked up with a hint of defiance. Don't make us wait too long, or I'll stop wearing this stupid dress for you. At first, she was hesitant to share her thoughts, then she started threatening him. The cause of her uncertainty had to be related to her biggest ambition, becoming a Vasto Lord. Kazuya gave her a gentle hug. I'll see you in Hueco Mundo. Kazuya's next stop was his mansion's basement training ground, a rocky desert dwarfing the mansion above. The spatial Kido spells had him intrigued. He'd pay Kasuke's friend, Tessai, in blood to learn these spells. He would devote his time to Kido practice once he got rid of Aizen. His versatility, impressive as it was, seemed but a pale shadow of what he could achieve. He craved more. Drawing breath into his lungs, he cupped his hands around his mouth. Get your asses over here. His voice, amplified through Ryatsu, made the very space tremble, carrying his will to every corner of these barren grounds. The seals around the training grounds meant he could use his Ryatsu as he pleased. In response to his summons, 3 figures dashed to his side. No need to yell, leader, Lillinette said, stirring her ear with her pinky finger. Right, Minoli? The eye-patched Arankar with short blonde hair nodded her head with a quiet Nobody would even think of this tame woman as the same species as those soul-devouring monsters. Stark weaved his fingers through his messy hair, looking at Kazuya with his right eye closed. Hell must have frozen over for you to show your face here. Ouch! Do I look like someone who doesn't care about his friends? Stark glanced at Lillinette and knocked on her helmet. I'm not saying you don't. It's just... I get bored just sleeping around, you know? Lillinette and Minoli would often go to play upstairs, whereas Stark would be stuck here all alone. While it beat having to kill hollows with his presence alone, he was starting to get bored. He did join Lillinette once, however, he quit after an hour of unbearable awkwardness he brought with him. Stark wasn't a fit for the good fellows upstairs. Kazuya chuckled. Got it. I promise I'll spend more time with you all after I take care of this thorn in my way. Aizen? Stark asked, rubbing the back of his head. Call on me when you want to take care of his Arankar army. I dislike fighting, but it's the least I can do to help you. I was here for that. Join Tyr and the rest in the morning. We're going to war. Stark nodded his head. We'll be there. Lilinet punched Stark's belly, making him bend at the most awkward angle. Ask meaningly before agreeing to this. Stark rubbed his belly with a groan. What the? Meaningly, you aren't coming? Meaningly turned her gaze to Kazuya instead, her eyes inquiring him can I, and non-verbally. He was her leader, after all, and she had no desire to make any decision against his will. Kazuya reached out and pinched her cheek. What do you want to do? Her left widened in surprise, her right would too if it wasn't completely swallowed by her hollow hole. She stared at his face, contemplating to herself or simply afraid to give a voice to her thoughts. He took back his hand and dusted his shoulder. Do you want to join us in the fight, or do you want to stay here? If you do come, I'll give you a VIP seat for Espada's end. You don't have to fight anyone either. Ah. She glanced at Lilinet, who responded with a smug face. I'll go. There you go. Lilinet laughed and patted, or rather slapped, Meaningly's back. No need to be scared of this big guy. He's a softie inside like Stark. Stark let out a sigh, looking like he had resigned to being toyed about at the hands of Lilinet, the manifestation of his resurrection. Kazuya patted Stark's shoulder with a sympathetic I know your pain look. They were in similar boats except his resurrection was sexier, instead of cute, and a whole lot more unhinged. Stark frowned. Is Grimmjow's group coming? Wasn't he with you? Kazuya asked, a little puzzled by the question. He had left Grimmjow's rowdy group with Stark and Kasuke. I didn't see him with Kasuke when you shifted here. He never returned after he left to help Kasuke that night. Kazuya clicked his tongue. That fucker must have escaped when Kasuke was fighting Aizen. Why didn't you bring it up earlier? Stark scratched his cheek. I wanted to confirm it with Kasuke. He never showed up here, then I forgot. Where do you reckon he went? Hueco Mundo. Chapter 283 through 284, Bamboozled. Aizen and his less-than-perfect version of Espada had an iron grip over Las Noches and Hueco Mundo as a whole. Their grip was iron, yes, but even iron would shatter if struck at its weakest point. Kazuya had assembled nearly all the pieces needed to strike, save for Grimmjow's missing unruly squad. Neliel would fit seamlessly into Grimmjow's place, and he intended to invite her for the upcoming battles. Only Soifon remained a potential obstacle in his campaign. A subtle smile curved Kazuya's lips. He hadn't come this far without mastering the art of turning foes into allies. He could handle her in two ways, with his own wits or through Orochi, who could distract Soifon long enough for him to proceed with his plans. Still, he kept his confidence in check, acutely aware of how quickly such comfort could turn to ice when Aizen was involved. Let's find Unohana. Shinigami went about two ways to find someone with concealed Ryatsu, through following their Ryatsu trail or the old-fashioned search. He neither had time nor need for either of these methods. He was, after all, a Vasto Lorde-level Arrancar. He shifted into his hollow form and closed his eyes. A radiating pulse sent out from him as the center, registering the Ryatsu of each and every soul in the city as dots of light similar to distant stars. The Visored and Haribel remained hidden with their Ryatsu concealing Jigai, but Unohana shone as the brightest star in his mind's eyes. Having the senses of a Vasto Lord Arrancar and the fine control of Ryoryoku like Quincy had its benefits. That place. I'm not even surprised. He made his way back to the most popular Shinigami spot in the town, the old wooden bridge standing over the flowing river. He stood by Unohana's side with a friendly smile. Hey, gorgeous. Would you mind accompanying me on this lovely dawn? She glanced at him, her gaze steady yet distant. It seemed quite obvious she lacked the desire to argue with him on one of the most important days in his life, which doubled for the Soul Society as a whole. Perhaps ask me again when you return from Hueco Mundo. He chuckled at her rather shrewd answer. Your stance won't change in 2 days. In your eyes, I'm just a young lad too fond of ladies. But I know it'll change soon. I'll try my hardest to bring that change. You are. Whatever judgment she meant to pass died on her lips as he turned to face her with a smile. the smile which became radiant under the red hues of the rising sun. An unfamiliar warmth stirred within her, a soft flutter that quickened her heartbeat. Suddenly, meeting his eyes felt daunting, and she averted her gaze like a maiden too shy to meet the eyes of her lover. Before she could comprehend the unfamiliar sensations, a pulse throbbed beneath the scar below her throat. A soothing yet chilling voice echoed in the chambers of her mind, overwhelming all else. "Kill him." She looked away from him and clenched her fist, nails biting into her palm as she fought the dark impulse. Before her, the river caught the dawn's light like wildfire. The water's surface rippled with mesmerizing crimson and scarlets that made the rest of the world seem dull in comparison. However, this beauty was lost on her as an insatiable hunger for violence gnawed at her. She felt like a traitor to the young man who stood within the reach of her arms, within the reach of her sword. "Kazuya, we should leave." Her voice was barely above a whisper over the gentle rush of water. She unsheathed her katana and thrust it in the empty area beside her before twisting it like a key placed into a door. Release. A seam opened in the empty space before expanding into rows of traditional Japanese doors that wouldn't have looked out of place in feudal Japan. The central door slid open with a hum, spilling blinding light as it revealed a well-lit empty room inside. Returning her katana to its sheath, she draped the cord of her zanpakuto across her shoulder. She did not wait, could not wait, for his response. Stepping through the threshold, she moved as though putting distance between them might quench the hunger within her. Kazuya watched her departure, confusion mingling with concern. He understood she was protecting him in her own way, which was quite necessary. He could handle her even at her worst. There was no denying now that his presence had become like a sword at her throat. He had to come up with a solution before the sword dug any deeper and made her revert back to the utterly insane Unohana of the Old Soul Society. "Well, she'll enjoy 2 days without me." Unohana looked over her shoulder with a gloomy gaze. "Kazuya." He mustered a reassuring smile. "Coming right away." The following few minutes could be summed in one word: awkward. Unohana remained quiet even on the other side of the Senkamen, which, for some strange reason, took them to the main door of the 4th Squad's base. Kazuya couldn't help but think his time could have been saved if Unohana had taken him directly to his quarters. Without word or ceremony, she thrust open the imposing wooden doors and stepped within. He, too, followed, the silence stretching between them like the strained wire. As they walked through the serene gardens of the 4th Squad, Unohana avoided his gaze entirely. Not because his appearance displeased her, in fact, she found his features easy on her eyes. But locking eyes with him only stirred the whirlwind of her dark urges, a battle she had to win for her pride, her confidence, and their relationship. At least the Shinigami on duty greeted him with smiles and adoration. The nurses, especially, gave him looks of admiration, mixed with seductive cues. "Retsu, where are we going?" he whispered as he leaned to her side. "I have to meet up with Soifon and leave for Hueco Mundo." She shot him a sharp glance before fixing her eyes ahead, pointing toward a secluded warehouse at the far end of the grounds. "Come with me," he crouched and swept her into his arms. The world blurred around them as he flash-stepped to their destination. The air felt heavy with a medicinal scent that was barely masked by the scent of nature coming from the surrounding gardens. Setting her down carefully, he scrutinized the warehouse before them. Though it appeared like an ordinary building, the warehouse gave him a strange feeling, like there was something hidden beneath its ordinary surface. A layer of secrets that his eyes couldn't unravel. Unohana fixed her braids before tapping his forehead lightly with a finger, her gaze locked on his lips and chin instead of his eyes. "Stop asking questions like a child. Head inside." The insistence behind her actions strongly implied that she was setting him up. But for what? He sensed no Ryatsu within the building, which only deepened his suspicion. "Huh. Wait, I get it now. There is, go inside," she repeated in a much firmer tone. "If you have any speck of affection for me, you'll not deny my request." All right. All right." He exhaled a weary sigh and pushed open the door. The first glimpse of the warehouse laid bare Unohana's secret plan. The Ryatsu concealment had been there to hide the presence of a female Shinigami who sorted out crates of medicinal supplies and put them in orderly stacks. The tall vice captain, who had accepted his proposal not too long ago, paused in her labors to wipe the sheen from her brow. She drank some water from a bottle before continuing her work. He knew that her composed demeanor would completely shift once she realized his presence. "Speak with her," Unohana said, and shoved him inside before she locked the door. "Don't take too long." The sound of her footsteps faded, leaving the two of them enveloped in the quiet stillness. Aizen spun around, sensing his Ryatsu at last. "Kazuya?" Panic rose in her eyes. Had she held anything in that moment, it would surely have clattered to the ground. "When did you?" It was evident that she, too, had been unaware of Unohana's true intentions. Like him, she had been tricked into coming here. The Ryatsu concealment had trapped her inside a building with him with nowhere to escape. "Easy, Aizen," he said softly. "No need to panic." She took a deep breath, her cheeks tinged with a faint blush. "I'm not panicking. It's just—" While she gathered her scattered thoughts, he quietly closed the distance between them. If Yoruchi was here, she would be quite proud of his stealth. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Retsu tricked us both." Aizen placed her hand on his, her gaze carrying complicated emotions. "It's all because of me. I didn't know how to face you after that. After that day, I can't think straight when I think about you. I get dizzy, and I run away. I am a coward." Her eyes glimmered with a hint of tears. She looked away with a nervous laugh, her hand moving to scratch the back of her head. It's embarrassing to say it out loud. She had been terrified of the possibility that her escape from his house infuriated him. That he would stop seeing her as cute, stop desiring her as a woman, and even worse, stop loving her. All of her fears simply existed in her imaginations. He brought her into his arms and stroked her back. "Aizen, you charged in to help others when Arancars invaded. Doesn't sound like a coward to me." "I guess I'm not afraid of getting hurt," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper as she rested her forehead against his chest. "Are you upset with me?" "Of course not." She wrapped her arms around his back and leaned into him. He rubbed her back and let her enjoy a moment of comfort. He knew Soifan would be furious about his delay, but right now, that seemed a distant concern. "Kazuya," Aizen murmured after a stretch of comfortable silence. "How come I didn't notice your Ryatsu earlier? Didn't you see the field around the warehouse? You only noticed my Ryatsu once I stepped inside." "Oh. I didn't pay any attention." She giggled softly. "I knew something was strange when Captain Unohana asked me to sort supplies." She hadn't done this type of work since she got promoted to the 10th seat. The fact that she was told to work alone also raised doubts in her mind. Still, she followed her captain's orders and came here. "Retsu is sneaky like that," he said. "Anyways, thanks for helping Momo the other day. Please, don't mention it. It's understandable they didn't have the money to buy anything." Footsteps approached outside, prompting him to gently tousle her messy hair. "I should get going." "Oh!" She stepped back hastily, unable to contain the hint of disappointment in her eyes. "Sorry. I didn't mean to keep you." "It's fine, geez. I'll see you in 2 days." He briefly explained his upcoming mission, watching as concern flickered across her face. "It'll be dangerous," she whispered, unconsciously grasping his sleeve. "Stay safe out there." As much as she wished to accompany him, she knew the limitation of her capabilities. She would be a burden on an expedition that valued mobility and stealth. "Don't worry about me. Also, can you fetch Rukia and Momo in the evening and escort them to Retsu's house?" She meekly nodded at his request. "Anything else?" "Teach them some useful Kido spells and combat techniques. Better be prepared for future Shinigami work, right?" She offered a determined smile. "I'll invite Nanao too." She is a better keto user than me. Say hi to her for me. He embraced her once more before exiting the warehouse. Unohana awaited calmly outside. As he closed the door, she caught a glimpse of Aizen's beaming smile, a sight that affirmed her decision to orchestrate their meeting. She regarded him with a knowing smile. You have Aizen, Momo, Rukia, Harabel, Sun, Mila Rose, Izumi, and that eternally angry maid. Yoruchi, too. Perhaps it's time you stop aiming your lustful desires at this vengeful old lady. He walked past her before sneakily planting a kiss on her cheek. Never. With that declaration, he vanished, Flash stepping out of sight. Kazuya had anticipated many surprises upon returning home, but nothing prepared him for the sight of Yoruchi, Nami, and Soifan sharing the same room in apparent harmony. The said peace was achieved through the combined efforts of Yoruchi and Nami, leaving Soi with no chance to start her usual shenanigans. He slipped through the open window, landing softly on the floor as 3 pairs of eyes turned toward him. Soifan and Nami sat on opposite ends of the bed, a noticeable distance between them. Yoruchi lounged casually on the bed, her head resting on one hand, a casual grin on her face. Partner! Nami beamed her brightest smile. Looks like everything went according to plan. Yup. Great! I'll rest in your inner world. He nodded, understanding her need for rest. Maintaining a physical presence would be a breeze for her if she wasn't hosting Tsubaki's soul within her own. As Tsubaki's soul rejuvenated, Nami's soul became unstable, like a cup already full trying to hold more water. See ya. With a graceful nod, Nami's form dissolved into shimmering crimson flames, swirling before they were drawn back into his zanpakuto. Turning his attention to Soifan, he offered a disarming smile. Hey! Soifan's face darkened, her fist clenched on her lap. I told you the exact time of our departure. You still kept me waiting. Are you going to sabotage the mission out of spite? Yoruchi sat up and flicked Soifan's forehead with the causality of an older sibling bullying the younger sibling. She ignored the hateful glare of her former disciple. Hey, it's fun. It's why Kazu does this to everyone. She went for another flick. However, this time, Soifan was prepared for it. Enough! Soifan growled. Don't interfere with official business. Yoruchi crossed her arms, unbothered. Oh, come on. He's only a couple of minutes late. Stop acting like he violated your little chrysanthemums. Soifan's mouth hung open as a look of raw embarrassment replaced the anger on her face. She clearly understood the vulgar slang that stood for anus. What are you even talking about? Yoruchi smirked like a lecherous old man. Our little Fawn knows her stuff. Flushed, Soifan glared at Yoruchi. Get lost. Kazuya watched the exchange, feeling somewhat like an outsider in his own home. Clearing his throat, he decided it was time to steer things back on track. Soifan, let's get moving. He reached out and gently took Soifan's arm, pulling her to her feet. Yeah, turn into your cat form. I'll need you with me. Yoruchi threw her arms in the air. Aye, Captain. That's the end of this tale for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in part 10. Peace.